Liheslaturan Guåhan is hereby called to order. This is an emergency session called, as I had certified on June 18, 2023, that emergency conditions exist which justify an emergency session. These emergency situation exists as a result of Typhoon Mawar. Majority Leader. Majority Leader, you are recognized regarding the agenda.
Buenas and half a day, Madam Speaker. Notwithstanding the House rules, I move to adopt today's legislative session agenda dated June 19, 2023.
On that motion to adopt the legislative session agenda, is there any objection? Seeing no objection, motion carries. Majority Leader, Senator Shelton, you are recognized.
Assiduous Masi, Madam Speaker. Notwithstanding the House rules, I move to waive legislative session agenda items 2 through 6, which are the prayer, recognition of a recipient of Milaadsan Mastakilu na Sacrificio, reciting of the Inafresi, singing of the Guam hymn in Chamorro, and singing of the national anthem.
On the motion to waive those items on our agenda, is there any objection? Seeing no objection, motion carries. We're now on roll call. Clerks, please take the roll.
Senator Barnett, Senator Blas, Senator Brown, Senator Dueñas, Senator Fisher, Senator Lujan, Vice Speaker Munya Barnes, Senator Parkinson, Senator Perez, Senator Canatza, Senator San Agustin, Senator San Nicolas, Senator Shelton, Senator Tidegui, Speaker Terlahi. Madam Speaker, there is a quorum.
Thank you, Clerk. Again, thank you, Senators, for your patience. Majority Leader, Senator Shelton, you are recognized.
Assiduous Masi, Madam Speaker. Notwithstanding the House rules, I move to waive legislative session agenda items 8 through 12, call for approval of the Legislative Journal, communications and petitions, messages from Liheslaturan Guåhan, reports of standing committees, and reports of select committees.
A motion was made to waive legislative session agenda items as stated. Is there any objection? Seeing no objection, motion carries. We're now on the introduction and first reading of bills and resolutions. Majority Leader, Senator Shelton, you are recognized.
Assiduous Masi, Madam Speaker. I move that bills introduced, bill numbers 130-37 COR through 139-37 COR, and resolutions introduced, resolution numbers 142-37 LS, 143-37 LS, and 144-37 COR through 146-37 COR be deemed to have been given their first reading.
On that motion regarding the first reading, the introduction and first reading of bills and resolutions, are there any objections? Seeing no objection, motion carries. We're now under motions. Majority Leader, Senator Shelton, you are recognized under motions.
Thank you very much, Madam Speaker. I'll move the point. Yeah, okay. I move to place bill number 135-37 COR on the session agenda.
Yeah,
An act to authorize the extension of the Gas Tax Relief Act for another 180 calendar days. Sponsored by Senator Joe San Agustin.
there's been a motion to place bill number 135-37 COR on the agenda. Is there any objection? Seeing no objection, motion carries. Majority Leader, Senator Shelton, is there a motion regarding senators not present?
Yes, Madam Speaker, I move to excuse senators not present for today's session.
On that motion, is there any objection? Seeing no objection, motion carries. Vice Speaker Tina Muñoz-Barnes, you are recognized.
Madam Speaker, I hope this is in order at this time. Notwithstanding the House rules, I move that Bill number 137-37 COR, which was a bill that was introduced by you, which is an act to amend Public Law 36-54 to support the Department of Public Health and Social Services in their efforts to provide grants to local organizations for emergency food and commodity assistance to individual and families who were affected by Typhoon Mawar, into the agenda. Madam Speaker, please, if I may.
On that motion, is there any objection? Seeing no objection, motion carries.
Madam Speaker, I do have one more, if I may.
Vice Speaker Tina Muñoz-Barnes, you are recognized.
This bill was also introduced by you, Madam Speaker. It's a bill number 139-37 COR, which is an act to amend Public Law 37-17 to ensure that Liheslaturan Guåhan can utilize funds from the $50 million general fund appropriations for emergency response expenses in response to Typhoon Mawar for purposes specific to supplemental funding to farmers, fishermen, co-op recovery efforts to power generators for DOE school facilities and the establishment of shelters and temporary housing subsidies into the agenda. Madam Speaker, for me.
On that motion, is there any objection? Seeing no objection, motion carries. We're still on motions. Are there any other motions? Senator Parkinson, you are recognized.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I'd like to make a motion, notwithstanding the House rules, to add Bill number 134-37 COR, an act to appropriate the sum of $2 million from the Rainy Day Fund to farmers for crop damages program established pursuant to Chapter 64A, Title 5 of the Guam Code annotated.
A point of inquiry.
Senator San Agustin, please state your point of inquiry.
Madam Speaker, as I'm reading the bill that my colleague Senator Parker introduced, doesn't Bill 139-37 address that also? That maybe it just needs additional funding? Only because 139 did address a farmer's funding support.
Well,
Thank you for your point of inquiry. Would you like to respond to that point of inquiry?
yes, ma'am. For the crop loss compensation program, it is required by the original law that when the applications come in and the Department of Ag submits it to the request of the legislature for appropriation, we do the appropriation for it. Separate from whatever we may have done from giving the governor authority over the $50 million in transfer authority. And that being said, if we were to do this through the transfer authority, we'd still have to take that $2 million from somewhere else in the general fund. I would much prefer to use the rainy day fund as it was intended.
On the motion, the sponsor has asked that the public hearing be waived, and I have certified that according to the statute for crop loss compensation program and the current typhoon, that there is a situation that requires monetary relief to farmers and ranchers for losses to crops, livestock, and/or property due to natural disasters. And this compensation is proposed to come from the rainy day fund according to this bill. So is there any objection to putting this bill on the objection? Bill 134, there's an objection. All in favor, please raise your hand to putting the bill on the agenda. 7. Motion fails. Oh, sorry. I'm sorry. What did you put? Oh. Okay, colleagues, the clerk has informed me that I counted it wrong. It's actually 8 votes. So the motion passes. Is there any objection to us? We're going to revote on that, just to be very clear on the record. All in favor of placing Bill number 134 on the record, please raise your hand. Motion carries. We're still on motions. Are there any other motions? Senator Lujan, you are recognized. Oh, I'm so sorry. Senator, my apologies, Senator Lujan. Majority Leader?
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I move to place Bill number 136-37 COR, an act to add a new Section 7117 to Chapter 7, Title 17, Guam Code Annotated, relative to allowing the use of emergency procurement procedures to enable the Guam Department of Education to comply with Public Law 37-04 in the wake of Typhoon Mawar, sponsored by Senators Chris Barnett, Speaker Therese M. Terlahi, and Sabina Flores-Perez.
On the motion, is there any objection? Senator Brown?
Madam Speaker, you called us into emergency session to address one particular bill, and this is now turning into a free-for-all. We're being asked to vote on bills we don't even have before us to even review. This is almost like a circus here. So I would like to have a copy of these bills that are being motioned on the floor, since you guys have decided what you're going to put on without announcing it. I mean, why don't we all get our bills
Senator
and put
Brown,
them on the floor?
thank you. The clerks have informed me that all of the bills that we have brought up in session today, copies have been placed on your desk prior to the start of session. So that we're on the motion to place Bill number 136-37 on the agenda. Is there any objection? Is there any objection? Seeing no objection, motion carries. We're still on motions. Senator Lujan, you are recognized.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Madam Speaker, notwithstanding House rules, I like to also move to place Bill number 3-37 on the session agenda. Actually, Bill 337 rolls back the business privilege tax to 4% for any and all businesses currently paying 5%, and leaves all exemptions in place to all businesses who qualify for BPT of the 3% or less.
Thank you, Senator Lujan. On this motion, the author had also requested a waiver of the public hearing. In response to the sponsor of Bill number 3's request for a waiver of the public hearing on Bill number 3, the Committee on Appropriations has also sent me a letter, and so this is my determination. That while I agree that reduction of the BPT as proposed in the bill will provide relief to businesses who are struggling post-typhoon with multiple unanticipated expenses, and while there continues to be an emergency and conditions on Guam involving danger to public health and safety, it is unclear, based on the June 19, 2023 letter from Appropriations Chair and the BBMR fiscal note, if the bill will enhance or further endanger public health and safety. BBMR states that the loss of $50 million and no fiscal realignment plan included in the bill will impact the debt service and reduce funding currently appropriated for government operations. So the bill requires a full public hearing to determine if it will benefit or harm the health and safety of the people of Guam, and I've asked the Committee on Appropriations to have a hearing on this bill expeditiously. So I have denied the waiver of the public hearing, but of course it is up to the body if they would like to further proceed. So he's asked that the bill be placed on the agenda, notwithstanding the rules. There's been an objection. All in favor, please raise your hand. Bill number 3. Motion fails.
One more motion.
Yes, Senator Guåhan, you are recognized.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Madam Speaker, again, notwithstanding House rules, I move to place Bill number 4-37 on the floor. This suspends the BPT on food and medicine for 12 months, 1 year, Madam Speaker, in light of course, the havoc of Typhoon Mawar that wreaked havoc on our island, of course. The need for this measure is never greater than it is right now. This should instantly provide relief to our consumers at grocery stores, mom and pop stores, and all the places where people purchase food. Likewise, over-the-counter medicines. It should also very quickly help the diners and restaurants and all types of businesses to reduce expenses. So I move again to place, notwithstanding House rules, place Bill number 4-37 on the floor, Madam Speaker.
On the motion to place Bill number 4-37 COR on the session agenda, notwithstanding the rules, the author has requested again that the public hearing be waived. It was my determination, and I sent this to the author, that I agree that the reduction of VPT on food and medicine, if it results in the reduction of prices of food and medicine, is a matter of health and safety of the people of Guam, especially in our current situation of inflation and post-typhoon expenses. However, the Appropriations Committee Chair has alleged that passage of this bill will negatively affect people of Guam, including violations of bond indentures, which may result in acceleration of bond payments. Accordingly, this bill requires a full public hearing to determine if it will benefit or harm the health and safety of the people of Guam, and I will not be waiving the public hearing on Bill 4 and the committee chair has promised to hold a hearing on Bill number 4 expeditiously.
Point of inquiry.
What is point of order?
Point of inquiry.
Please state your point of inquiry, Senator.
Thank you, Madam
Ross.
Speaker. Madam Speaker, based on your determination, can I just basically, you said that it may affect or shall affect?
It may.
It may affect. Okay, so it may, and it may not, right? Okay, thank you very much.
What I said was that according to the letters, they state that it will. Because their letters say it will, and so I am stating that from that.
That's why I asked for
and
a point of
determine that
inquiry.
it may.
May
That's
and
correct.
shall are two different things. Will is definitive. I wanted that
Yeah, I'll
clarified.
repeat what I said. I said the Appropriations Committee Chair has alleged that the passage of this bill will negatively affect people of Guam, including violations of bond indentures, which may result in acceleration of bond payments. This bill accordingly, this bill requires a full public hearing to determine if it will benefit or harm the health and safety of the people of Guam. Accordingly, I will not be waiving the public hearing on Bill 4 and urge the committee chair to hear the bill expeditiously, and he has promised that he would do that.
Just for, Madam Chair, Madam Speaker, you did say may. That's why I asked for a point of inquiry. Can I have a copy of that letter, please?
Yes,
Thank you. Can we take a recess until we get that?
the senator has received a copy prior to session. I will make copies for everyone.
I'd like to be able to see that before I make a vote on this matter.
Give this to Senator Blas. We'll take a 1-minute recess. We're back from recess on bill, and we're back on, still on motions on bill number 4. There's been a motion to add bill number 4-37 COR to the session agenda, notwithstanding the rules. There's been an objection. All in favor, please raise your hand to adding it to the agenda. 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. Motion fails.
Oh, yeah.
We're still on motions. Is there any other motion? On motions? If not, then we will proceed. Majority Leader, Senator Shelton, you are recognized regarding legislative items 15.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Notwithstanding the House rules, I move to waive legislative session agenda items 15 and 16, the legislative concurrence and consent calendar.
On that motion, is there any objection? Seeing no objection, motion carries. We're now on second reading. We begin with bill number 135-37 COR. Senator San Agustin, you are recognized.
Thank you and good afternoon. Madam Speaker, colleagues, and to our people. Madam Speaker, I am appreciative of your quick response for this emergency session where we are addressing Bill 135-37. The bill intends to extend the moratorium on liquid fuel tax in an effort to positively and guarantee some relief at the gas pumps for our residents and businesses. This bill, if passed and enacted, will be the second extension of the moratorium. We passed the initial moratorium in Public Law 36-105 and passed the first extension in Public Law 36-124, which officially expired this past Saturday. This bill asks for an extension of 180 days from enactment. Madam Speaker, for some, 14 cents per gallon is not a lot to offer relief, but we know that for many of our families who are dependent on fuel for their livelihoods over the last several weeks, since the typhoon, gas purchases have increased. Notice in the weeks of long lines at the gas station. Every little saving we can guarantee our people is beneficial to their recovery. Our estimates in losing highway fund revenue as in the first extension is about $5.1 million. This will be left to the governor to ensure the program and services provided with this funding are not jeopardized for the last quarter of FY23, and that we will address the loss of revenue in FY24 budget for its first quarter, so approximately $2.5 million per quarter. Madam Speaker, while we are still in recovery from the pandemic and now the typhoon, I am asking for your support and of my colleagues to pass Bill 135 today, and let's get it to the governor for a signature so we can guarantee the small but impactful relief to the people. Sizus Marci. Thank you, Madam Speaker.
Thank you, Senator. Is that a motion to place on third?
Yes.
All right, so there's been a motion to place the bill on third reading. Is there anyone who'd like to discuss the bill? Senator Fisher, you're recognized.
Thank you, ma'am. I rise in support of the bill. I'd just like to remind the colleagues that pursuant to 11 GCA 26401, I think it is, 26403, the tax per gallon on diesel is 0.14 cents. The tax on all other fuels is an additional 0.15 or 15 cents per gallon. So if this extension doesn't pass, tomorrow morning gas prices will go up by 15 cents a gallon. So I'd like to do what I can do to help prevent that. Thank you.
Thank you, Senator Fisher. On the bill? Senator, Vice Speaker, you're recognized.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Real fast, I just want to say, in the efforts of working close with our families and our community, I want to say that I support the same efforts and do to know that because of the timeline, we're hoping that our residents don't get affected by this bill not being put into place. So I support the efforts. Sinamasi.
Sinamasi. On the bill.
Senator Chris Barnett, I recognize you at this time.
Thank you, Madam. I too rise in full support of this bill, and I commend the author for its introduction. And also, if I could just a point of information with the author, if he could verify what the previous speaker and Senator Fisher had said about the timeline of the expiration
Go ahead.
Of this.
Say your question,
sir. So
Senator.
just for the author, when does the gas tax relief act, this latest iteration, when does it actually expire?
Senator Joseph Agustin, would you like to answer that inquiry by Senator Barnett on the expiration date, sir?
That was 2 days ago.
It was 2 days.
Saturday night.
Senator Barnett, does that answer your inquiry?
Yes, ma'am, it does. Thank you. So have we, I guess there's a further point of information. I don't know if the author can answer this. Since this expired 2 days ago, have we seen a reflection? Well, I haven't seen, but has there been a reflection of the price of the pump?
I will ask the senator that. Senator San Agustin, would you like to answer?
Madam Speaker, there's no indication that the rates went up, but I know for a fact there was me personally communicating with two of the vendors, and I did address the issue of this bill, and they said that as long as there's movement, they're not going to raise the rates just for 1 day. And if this bill passes, then they move on, like they've been.
Thank you, Senator San Agustin. Senator Barnett, you still have the floor.
Thank you, Madam, and also like to thank the author for that clarification. And I'd also like to commend the gas companies for allowing us a little bit of grace and also respecting the legislative process, as I know that they have seen a big increase, right, in the purchases of gas, as many of our people lined up for hours on end to fill up tanks that maybe were even halfway full, just because of the desperation and the fear that we all felt when there was that uncertainty about whether or not we'd be able to fill up again before we used all the gas. So yeah, fully support this measure, and I think maybe a question for further on down the road is if we've been able to live without this gas tax for this long, maybe we should just consider a permanent repeal of it. Thank you, ma'am.
Thank you, Senator Barnett. On the main motion, Speaker Terlahi, you're recognized.
Thank you. I stand in support of the bill. I was in support of the original law that was passed and sponsor of one of the original laws that was passed. This is a program where the vendors have actually come in and sworn under oath that they would impart these savings from the tax to the consumers. And it was something that we were able to plan ahead on, and so we have not counted for these taxes for this fiscal year, and so there should be no adverse impact to any agencies or current services that we're providing as a government by continuing this. But most importantly, the impact to people who right now are, a lot of them still without power, and businesses still without reliable power, who are relying on generators, and sometimes without cell phones, are relying on transportation to communicate. All of it, I'm sure I don't have to reiterate for the public because they are living it, what this bill will do to keep the prices any rise in fuel prices. I can't say any, but at least the tax impacts on fuel costs, to keep those in abeyance during this period while they are recovering from the effects of Typhoon Mawar, I think are very, very important at this time, and something that we as a government can do.
Buen Pubetzl, Speaker Terlahi. Senator Parkinson on the main motion.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I too rise in support of this measure. Right now, our people are going through this recovery, and one of the most precious resources they have is fuel. Fuel for generators, fuel for vehicles, fuel for equipment to recover their lives. And I think it would be wholly appropriate to suspend this tax and make it just a little bit more affordable for people to put their lives back together. Thank you, and with that, I yield the rest of my time.
You're very welcome, Senator Parkinson. On the main motion, anyone else wishing to speak? If not, Senator San Agustin, you may close.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I just asked my colleagues to support, but to add co-sponsors, beginning with Speaker Therese Terlahi, Senator Tom Fisher, Senator Barnett, Senator Parkinson, and actually all others be added on to the bill, unless they object. Thank
On
you.
that motion, are there any objections? Seeing or hearing none, motion carries. On the motion to place, Senator San Agustin,
Yes, a motion to place on the vote on the
voting file.
Voting file, and if possible, if we can vote on this bill immediately and then send it to the governor. Thank you.
On that motion, hearing none, motion carries. I'm just going to take a moment's recess. Liheslaturan is back in session. Senator San Augustine, I'm going to ask to reassert your motion. Senator San Augustine? Your bill of 135-37 was placed in the voting file, but if you wanted to move on to restate your second motion at this time, or will you wait?
I'd wait.
Thank you.
I'm just hoping by the end of the day we can be done with it.
Thank you, Senator San Augustine. At this time, colleagues, Speaker Therese, you are recognized on Bill 137-37. You may proceed.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Bill number 137-37 COR is an act to amend Public Law 3654 to support the Department of Public Health and Social Services in their efforts to provide grants to local organizations for emergency food and commodity assistance to individuals and families who were affected by Typhoon Mawar. As you can recall, when we were doing a budget financing a couple of years ago, there was projected savings, and the legislature had appropriated a small part of that projected savings, $5 million to be exact, towards to public health for the purpose of, as stated in Section 2 of the law, it was to go to local nonprofit organizations that provide food and commodities for homeless individuals, unemployed individuals, children, and low-income families until fully expended. Well, I've been following up on the expenditures of this money, and it has not been expended to date. It seems to me the explanations that I've received are always related to the solicitation that they put out was after many delays. They finally put it out. They got all the way to the award stage, and it was rejected by the Attorney General's office. So they're back to square one. And since then, it has not been awarded. I would like that money, instead of, this is an extraordinary measure, but I believe we are in extraordinary times, and I would like this money, originally intended for emergency food during COVID, to be put out there as emergency food today. I don't think I need to convince my colleagues why that's important, but I'll tell you why we can do it. The money is available. The money should have gone out. It's really a procurement issue. So my language in this bill, what I'm proposing to do is to amend where it says that public health was going to give this out in the form of grants distributed to the local nonprofit organizations. Apparently, that ties them all up. I'm not sure why to this date, but I'm hoping that this new language is going to be very direct. And again, it's extraordinary. It just says that the emergency, that public health, that we're giving them the money for the sole purpose of providing emergency food and commodities to individuals in need, or which shall be distributed in whole or part as grants at the discretion of the director, notwithstanding 5 GCA Chapter 5. To Catholic Social Services Guam, the Salvation Army Guam, or other local nonprofit organizations that provide food and commodities. And the reason for this is because instead of bidding it out, who's going to do the best program, that's where they've got tied up for, seems like, years. And we're talking about nonprofits here. They're not going to profit from it. I don't believe there's a risk of corruption. And I do believe there's a huge need for food. And so if we can give it directly to the agencies who have proven over and over and over to the people of Guam that they are going to be there for us, I would like to do that. Let's give it to them and let them distribute it if public health can't do it themselves. This bill still allows them to do it themselves if they are able, such as distributing it at their health centers, distributing it when they go out in the field, the nurses, and those other programs that they do have, outreach programs. But if they're not able to do that, then by all means to give it directly, this money, to the Catholic Social Services and the Salvation Army Guam, who run food pantries every single day on Guam and get this food out to the people in need. And the exact people who we want to get it to. People in shelters, they will be able to get in there and give it to them. So I beg my colleagues for your indulgence on this. I know it's a little bit unusual, but I believe it's just needed right now, unfortunately and fortunately. We can do it, so I'd like to say that we could do this, if we could. Thank you, Madam Speaker.
Thank you, Speaker Chilai. Senator Fisher on the motion. You are recognized.
Thank you very much, ma'am. I rise to a point of inquiry. Would
State
Senator
your question.
Terlahi yield to the following? Has she seen the grants that are proposed by the Department of Public Health and Social Services?
Senator Fisher, can you restate your question? I'm sorry, I didn't hear it.
Certainly, ma'am. Has Senator Terlahi actually seen any of the grants that are proposed under this program?
And I will ask Speaker Terlahi, would you like to yield to the question?
No, of course, they haven't been made yet. There was a proposal by Public Health after many years, and they put it on the table. They did a solicitation. They got companies even, I think, from off island who were asking to be part of that food distribution. But, and some good people, I'm sure, involved. But the issue was, to be honest, I don't know the exact reason the AG denied it, but I do know that it went back to GSA after all of that. After Public Health had worked on it, went back to GSA. I think Public Health is still working on it. And so that's the issue. So no, the grants, no. What I'm expecting literally to take the food and the money and divide it up and give it to them in appropriation amounts so they can fill their food pantries with the food that they know from their experience is necessary.
Thank you, Speaker Terlahi. Senator Fisher, you
Yes.
still have the floor.
Thank you, ma'am. A further question to Speaker Terlahi, if she will yield. In light of the fact that we haven't seen the grants, and in light of the fact that we don't know how the money will be spent, and in light of the fact that, at least as of today, we don't know how the money will be spent, and we don't know who the recipients of the money will be, all of which she has said is all conjectural. I'm wondering if she believes that this can, under any wise, be called an emergency. We haven't seen anything that brigades the necessary $5 million. So just as she was able to explain to us why Senator Lujan's bills were not emergencies, I hope she will do the same for us under this bill.
We're working on this bill, Senator Fisher, but I will ask the good speaker if she'd like to yield. Speaker Terlahi, would you like to yield to that question?
I would love to yield to that question, Madam Speaker. Yes. First of all, this bill deals with an existing appropriation that's been in place since Public Law 3654. That was last term, which actually was in place prior to that, because it says notwithstanding the, it talks about Public Law 36-9. So for 2 budget cycles, this food has not gone out. And this is for emergency food during COVID. And if you want me to explain why we have an emergency for food right now, people don't have power. So they had to close down their refrigerators and freezers, and they cannot cook unless they have a gas stove. They have no food. That's why they line up sometimes for long periods of time to get simple canned goods, or MREs, is that what it's called? The MREs. And they're willing to line up to get that food, to get powdered milk and water. And that's all this is going to do. And yes, it's an emergency. FEMA has declared food to be an essential item that needs to be passed out. The mayors are asking for more every day. Every situation we have seen in the news is showing the situation that the people of Guam are living under in the shelters. We've got American Red Cross passing out some hot meals. We've got them providing food in the shelters. But still, the people in the shelters say they're hungry. Still, the people of Guam want some help. It's as simple as that. They've gone through major disaster, and they don't even have homes, let alone refrigerators and freezers and a place to cook these things on. So while we are trying to get that to them, This money is going to go out to food eventually, and I say, get it out now. Don't wait until, let's not be like those agencies that take forever and ever, and let's get it out now. And this is the way I'm hoping the legislature can find in itself the compassion to get it out this way. It's something that's going to require us to do what I don't even like to do, and that is to trust the director that he's competent enough to get the money out exactly to, and it's not to, I don't know, I know, Catholic Social Services Guam and the Salvation Army Guam at the very least. At the very least. And if you can get it out to those two, I'm very confident that they will be able to get it out where it is needed in the community. And that's why I put them directly in there. And I don't know, I hope I don't need to continue on as to why the people of Guam need food and commodities during this disaster period, and why Catholic Social Services and the Salvation Army Guam are absolutely capable of doing this. And right now, we are relying on them to do that because we have seen some failures on our part as a government to do this.
Buen provecho, Speaker Chirlahi. Senator Fisher, you still have the floor. You have a couple of minutes.
Thank you very much, ma'am. I appreciate a further question then to the Speaker. I appreciate the fact that she wants to get help out to the people of Guam as quickly as possible, and that is the animus behind the bill. My question is this. First of all, we don't know where the money is going to go because we haven't seen a grant program, and the actual heart of the question is as follows. Does Speaker Terlahi agree that Senator Lujan's bills, which would have lowered prices for all consumers on Guam for food, commodities, and medicine, does she agree that that too would help the people of Guam? And could she provide an explanation for why one help is an emergent situation and the other is not? Thank you.
I actually
Speaker
think it's
Chirlahi.
out of order, but I'm happy
Yes.
to avail. And I want the people of Guam to understand too. Yes, if we could today lower prices of food and medicine without impacting our entire debt service, meaning breach our covenant with bond holders, that's very different. A proposal that will, according to Gita, breach our indenture with bond covenants, or breach our bond covenants, that will result in we are going to have to come up with all that money out of the general fund after being told that there is no money. It's a huge impact. In fact, that would create probably a bigger disaster than the one we are facing right now. I don't know. When we don't know, we can't tell. That's why I asked that that bill have a public hearing, so we can flesh that out. This bill, the money's there. It's been there. It's there. Everybody knows it's there. Everybody's able to use it. The AG is involved. GSA is involved. Public health is involved. And we know that these agencies are able to move on it. So there's no harm from passing this bill that takes an existing appropriation to go out to nonprofit aid organizations in general and gives it specifically to Catholic Social Services, Salvation Army, and on top of that, if the director has other nonprofits such as the Chukis Association of Guam and those other nonprofits that are willing to help, that he can do that. Simple. There's no risk of creating another huge disaster by breaching our bond covenants. That's one. But like I said, if we could lower the price of anything today, I say we can do that, but we've got to get over the hurdles that have been put in front of us. And this bill has no hurdles. That's what it does. It takes away any hurdles.
Thank you, Speaker Chirlahi. Senator Fisher.
Yes, thank you, Vice Speaker, and thank you to Speaker Terlahi.
I will recognize Legislative Secretary and then Senator San Agustin. Legislative Secretary, on the motion, on the main motion, you are recognized.
Thank you very much, Madam Speaker. I rise in support of this bill, and of course, recognizing the need to help our community in any way that we can. In response to this super typhoon that hit us just a few days ago, I think people rather see us out helping them in any way that we can, but we're here doing our job in this small way to be able to allow the organizations who are in place. Sometimes we know that government can't do everything, and we have nonprofit organizations there to support us, and I'm glad that we're able to give the support that we need to on our end to get the help out to the people of Guam. Many of us in this body have been out packing food commodities, helping the mayors distribute these food commodities, walking door to door with them, passing them out to families, and we've seen the devastation in our villages. And one of the first houses that I knocked on the door of, a man came out and said, "Thank you so much. We are so hungry." And this was days after the storm, but of course without power or food, their roads were blocked in with debris. There was no way for them to get food. And as the speaker mentioned, we've seen the long lines for fast food establishments that are now reopening, the restaurants, because people can't cook at home. They can't provide for their families. They can't feed their children. And these food commodities have been a great blessing. The water has been a great blessing to people. And there has been so much gratitude, I think, for this. And this is something small that we can do as a body today, and I'm in full support of this, for us to allow others to help the government get the help to the people of Guam. So Saduas Masi to the Speaker, and I ask our colleagues to support as well.
Buen Pobetsu, Legislative Secretary Shelton, and at this time I recognize Senator Joseph Agustin. You may proceed.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I rise in full support of this bill. You know, exactly what the author said. The money's there. They're supposed to do the grant. The grant didn't happen. It's all I wish it could have happened. It didn't happen, but this is a means of getting that money to those nonprofit organizations and getting it done. All the reasons to associate it with this bill, for me, is unacceptable, but I do rise in full support, and my final statement is let's get her done, and let's just help the people. Thank you.
You're very welcome, Senator San Agustin. Anyone else on the main motion? If not, Speaker Chirla. Okay. Minority Leader and then Senator Barnett. Minority Leader Blas, you are recognized.
Thank you, Madam Vice Speaker. Madam Vice Speaker, I understand the intent and the necessity for the bill. But I just take notice to page 2, starting line 16, that while we want to be able to provide it to individuals who are in need and stuff, I know that line 16 to line 18 basically categorizes the individuals, but do we want to take a 1-minute recess and talk to the author of this? 1-minute recess.
I'm going to give a moment's recess. 37th Guam Legislature is back from recess. Minority Leader Blas, you're still recognized.
Thank you for the opportunity to be able to discuss with the author. Madam Chair, basically my concern was the language that's contained from line 16 to line 18, whereby I understand that, we want to be able to make sure that these people are taken care of, but I just don't want it to be too narrow or too restrictive that it basically leaves out individuals that do need the commodities. So what I'd like to do basically is, notwithstanding the House rules, and I recognize what it is and as far as the amendments, but starting from line 16, the word homeless, to line 18, income, is basically food and commodities for those individuals and families in need until fully expended.
Minority Leader, do you have that in writing?
No.
No objection.
On the motion, if everybody understands, are there any objections? Seeing or hearing none, motion carries. I'll save a tree on this one.
Thank you.
Minority Leader, you're still recognized. You done?
I'm done.
Senator Barnett, on the main motion.
Thank you, Madam. I rise in support of this measure, which I know the idea of giving public health the ability to give out emergency food and commodities was something that was, the origin of this measure was in the 36th Guam Legislature. And so had we done what the original bill intended, then, we could have definitely avoided our people going hungry, because people are hungry out there. Let's just be honest with each other. When someone tells you you're hungry, you don't waste time and energy trying to convince them that they are not. Our people are hungry. I had a debriefing with the leadership of the Salvation Army just a few days ago, and they told me that they spent way over their budget, right? But that's just what they do. Hold on. Their food pantry is down to 50% capacity, and they want to do more. But they can't do more because who are they going to ask for more money? The people of Guam can't afford to donate. This money's sitting in the bank somewhere, as it has been, just ready to go. And our people are hungry. We've all done the commodities. We've all been putting the food into the boxes. I was up at Jigo where people lined up in their cars for 2 hours for a bag that had dry beans, tomato soup, more beans, Fanan 90% beans, but our people are desperate. Our people are hungry. And had we followed through on this great idea back when it was introduced and passed into law, maybe we would have been able to fill that gap that these nonprofits and these charity organizations are struggling to fill right now. Because that's what's happening right now. Because right now, a lot of these nonprofits are assessing where they can make the most impact, where they can deliver the most need. There's one thing I'll say, and I don't want to hurt anyone's feelings, but this recovery has taught many of us that not only do we need to do more, but we need to do better. And this bill is a great step in that direction. Because people are hungry. They don't care if it's a bag of dry beans or a meal ready to eat that you have to read an instruction manual or watch a video from Senator St. Nicholas to figure out how to get these meals hot. And they needed this food, they needed this assistance yesterday, okay? Especially in light of this disaster SNAP eligibility that has come out, where many of our people in the middle class are not going to qualify for these SNAP benefits. We have to consider that. Many people in our middle class, I don't care, when we're up at Jigo, we saw it all. We saw the Guam bomb. We saw the Lexus lining up for food. And now we're giving out this disaster SNAP, but it's a disaster that so many of our people are not going to be able to qualify for it. Hafa Moan, what now? And so this is a great step in the right direction. I only pray that people can fill the gaps while we sit and wait for the Director of Public Health to figure out how to get this food, which is going to come in handy whether it's next week or next month. As we all know, the National Weather Service has said that because of La Nina and El Nino and all of that, we can anticipate more storms. We can anticipate stronger storms. And the time to prepare is not after the fact, so let's start preparing now. Because it is an emergency that our people are going hungry. We went to Hamalani with hot dogs. They were hungry, little kids. Hadn't even eaten breakfast. Asking, can they get extra hot dogs for tomorrow? So I don't know who's out of touch here, but let me tell you, the reality is our people are hungry right now. They're hungry for a lot of things. But what we can do is we can help. And that's why this, I feel that this measure is going to pass unanimously. And let's give the people of Guam the help that they not only need, but that they needed. Thank you, Madam.
Thank you, Senator Barnett. On the main motion, Senator Parkinson, I will recognize you on the main motion.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I too rise in support of this measure. During this recovery process, I have been out there helping with food distribution, and I concur with my colleague who spoke before me. People are hungry out there. There are huge multi-generational homes. 9 people here, 6 people there, 8 people here, all living under one roof, all hungry, all rationing in some way to make sure the most vulnerable get this food. But we shouldn't have to ration like that. People should have food available for them. And I don't know what happened with previous appropriations on why this $5 million wasn't spent when it was appropriated during the pandemic. Frankly, I don't care. I care that this money is available and we can use it today for these emergency needs. And if we can, let's get our people fed, because as others have commented, this might not be the first storm on the horizon. And so if it takes a little bit of lead-up time to get our pantries squared away again, let's do so. There is federal assistance here on this island, but there is cracks in these federal assistance. Sometimes the federal assistance can't help. And these partnerships with nonprofits to help the community is how we address those gaps. Later this week, I'm going to be going back to places to help deliver hot food. And I know that when I go to them, I want to be able to tell them that more help is coming. The people are hungry. Let's get the food getting this way, and let's get them fed. With that, Madam Chair, I yield the rest of my time. Thank you.
You're very welcome, Senator Parkinson. Anyone else on the main motion? If not, Senator Fisher, you already spoke on the main motion.
Those were questions, ma'am?
So Senator Fisher, you spoke on the main motion.
I put questions to the speaker.
I will allow you a couple of minutes to speak on the measure of the bill.
Are you saying that I'm procedurally incorrect?
Yes, sir, you are procedurally incorrect.
Could you cite me to a rule?
Of order, Madam Speaker.
Yes,
Yes,
Speaker
I think you
Terlai.
are correct, Madam Speaker, that normally we're supposed to speak all we want to speak on our 15 minutes, including inquiries and amendments and anything else during that 15 minutes that we debate on the bill. But I have no objection, Madam Speaker.
Well,
Thank you, Speaker Cho.
Thank
I will
you.
yield back to you.
Madam
Then I would-
Objection, can I go again too?
Senator Barnett,
Thank-
you already spoke.
thank
Thank
you,
you
ma'am.
very much. Senator Fisher, you may proceed.
Well, I would like to thank Speaker Terlahi for her professional courtesy and her grace in allowing me a couple more minutes, as well as you, ma'am. I tend to agree with the previous speaker that this act, this proposal may pass unanimously. Nobody objects to the substance. Some of us object to the process by which it got to the floor. Now, we enjoy and we look forward to having public hearings so we can explore issues like under a grant program. Will these be distributed according to application? Will they be distributed uniformly throughout the island? How will this happen? Now, that would be I think all of those would be interesting subjects to explore at a hearing on this matter. And in doing so, we would be able to answer many of those questions. Taking a pitchfork and shoveling $5 million out the door and not knowing where it's going to go ultimately is not necessarily a best practice. So, ma'am, I don't want to miss the opportunity to be virtuous as well. So I'm going to think about it. I may support this bill because I want people to get fed too, and I agree that there's actual real hunger on this island, real hunger that pre-existed before Typhoon Mawar, in particularly marginalized and hard-hit areas of our community. I hope this feeling of sharing, this feeling of virtue, I hope it survives this emergency and we continue to remember the poor and the underserved in this community after this typhoon and its after effects have passed. I do hope that no child go to bed tonight hungry. I hope that very much. I don't think that's going to happen, but I hope it does. If the price we pay is an undisciplined and unfettered expenditure of $5 million taxpayer dollars under this situation. Well, I guess I'm not so sure there's a right answer to this one, ma'am, other than one of the things that is expected of us is responsibility fiscally. And so I'll continue to ponder this bill. And ma'am, thank you very much for the opportunity to readdress this. I apologize if procedurally I was in error, and allow me to please express my thank you to Speaker Terlahi once more. Thank you.
Thank you very much. You're very welcome, Senator Fisher. On the main motion, I ask Speaker Terlahi, you may close on your motion. Oh, I do apologize, Speaker. Senator Guåhan, I do apologize. I didn't see your hand. You may proceed.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Madam Speaker, all of us as well who stood and even those who are not speaking in regards to food distribution and helping in these centers or in these entities where food are being gathered and placed and getting ready to be distributed. As we speak, I got my staff as well in Tamuning Harmon Community Center. We've been camped out there for now almost three weeks distributing food, and today the Red Cross finally gave us hot meals, so 300 lunch meals were delivered. Likewise, 300 dinner meals will be delivered tonight as well. You know, the previous speaker, Senator Fisher, brought up, some vital, actually, questions, and I'd like to yield maybe to the author and ask this question: whether we came in a few days after the storm, and the FEMA folks were here, and we're asking about the reimbursement rates. and how that will be done. And the previous speaker, of course, made a good point in the sense that just throwing $5 million with a pitchfork and not knowing where it's going basically, and how this is going to be distributed. And we all know that the FEMA folks came in here and told us that whether it be a 75-25, 90-20, or maybe even 100% reimbursement, but definitely I's have to be dotted and T's have to be crossed. So my question is to the author is there a system in place to be able to track this to have it be reimbursable by FEMA?
Speaker Chalahi, would you like to answer that question?
Thank you. I know that despite what we're trying to do in the bill, which is to expedite, that we should reasonably expect that anything that the Department of Public Health and Social Services does is going to be documented. They also have to answer to all of us for what they did with the money. The issue is, in regards to reimbursement, this is one of the few particular areas specifically being lined up that might not necessarily be reimbursed. If it can, that's great. But I think, Senator, hopefully you would agree, and my colleagues who've been out there in the field will agree that there has been so much twisting and turning and waiting, trying to get this to our recovery efforts to fit into reimbursable chunks, and I just don't want food to be one of those things. So of course we've got all ways to distribute. We've got 50 million out there that the governor can use and get reimbursement to distribute food. People are still hungry. So that's the point. It's like I want a way for the food to get out there regardless of whether we get reimbursed for it. We were already willing to part with this money without reimbursement for food. And so if they can get reimbursed, of course, yes. But no, I'm not putting any other requirements on them except what they're, already required to do by law to account for it. But because that, for me, is the urgency of the situation that we have seen, is that we cannot wait. And we cannot rely solely on the Red Cross, who is doing a great job delivering some hot meals. But if you were waiting for a hot meal, I mean, I hate to say this, but even in some of I'm just going to be honest, but when you go out there, they're waiting for their hot meals, and if you're hungry and you're waiting and you don't even know whether they're going to hit your house that day or not, that's not a reliable source of food. It's antagonizing. It's agonizing, not antagonizing, agonizing. And I've seen this. I've seen people like beg. Is the American Red Cross, Mayor, is the American Red Cross going to come by my house today or not? And it's so, I don't want our people to have to beg for food. If they need food, that's the whole point. Reimbursable or not, is to get them the food. So, colleagues say, that's why I say it is an extraordinary measure. It's not our normal response, but I'm saying we are not in normal times. When people are begging for food, I don't want them to beg for food ever, let alone now, especially now, especially while, we have this money available to us, and this will supplement the already existing efforts of everybody else whose efforts might be reimbursable. Thank you, Madam Speaker.
You're welcome, Speaker Chalahi. Senator Guåhan, you still have the floor.
Yes, thank you very much to the author as well. And no, I agree. And in regards to the hot meals, and as a matter of fact, being in at the Tamuning Senior Citizen Center for almost 3 weeks now, this is the first, actually this, about 11 o'clock was the first lunch hot meals that was distributed in Tamuning, Tuman, and Harmon. And the next one this afternoon, they should be distributing right now as we speak, another 300. So since being there after the storm, this is the first hot meals that at least that the Tamuning Senior Citizen Center has been given out. There were canned goods, MREs, and water. And last week we ran out of everything for 2 days. But likewise, Madam Speaker, you know, it's confusing. We passed a bill in regards to $50 million, and and the Speaker and I, and as well as my staff, and the Vice Mayor were up at the shelter a few days ago. And I was with one of the governor's advisors, and we're talking about housing and these shelters. I mean, this decrepit situation they're in. I'm hoping they'll be moved out, but we're trying to find out. Red Cross is trying to find out who's in charge. FEMA's trying to find. We're trying to find out. FEMA's calling us. Red Cross is calling us. Us trying to find out what the heck is going on. And we go, who's in charge? And when we try to find out from the administration, they say, oh, it's all Red Cross. It's Red Cross. It's Red Cross. It's Red Cross. Red Cross saying, they give us a few places. We get, okay, this one because it's the biggest one. But then, you know, after that, it's washing their hands. So it is right. I mean, this legislature, we need to come in real soon, get the public audit to audit where these monies are going through, because right now at this point, we don't know even who's in charge of what. I mean, as a former leader said, we're in the state of the chows. You know? I mean, so that, I mean, it's really, yeah. I mean, well, wait a minute, we had $50 million for this and that. No, it's not it. No, this is being paid. It's all Red Cross, the Red Cross. I said, wow, you know, pandemic, the old ruling administration, now Taza power. I guess with Omar came also the green kryptonite, because now they're powerless. Anyway, I want to thank the author for clarifying or answering some of my questions. But no, absolutely, I support the measure being out there, again, with the folks, and as previous speakers saying, you know, this storm, and actually, I think it's double from what we have gone through from the pandemic on to Mawar. It's such an equalizer. We get the Guam bombs, we get the Lexuses, we get the Mercedes, all on the same line, asking for the same thing. And there is not one car, Madam Speaker, that you look in that there's pillows and blankets are all over, because quite a few, and then 90 or 95% of those people are sleeping in their cars. That being said, again, thank you for giving me this opportunity. Thank you, Madam Speaker.
You're very welcome, Senator Guåhan. Is anyone else on the main motion? Senator San Nicolas, I recognize you this time.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. You know, yesterday was Father's Day, and you know, all through this recovery, I was really trying my best not to be caught handing stuff out and passing stuff, so it doesn't look too political, or anything I do now. But my dad would always say, "Angin maulik bidadamo, mga mamala." Sa mo nakalang sa si Jesus on guneguya, you know, he'll take care of you. Here's an opportunity to help the people who need help. And you got to give it to them how you can, when you can. You have an opportunity. Mga mamala. And we need to do whatever we can to get this aid out there. Then let's do it. So I don't want to talk too long, but I just wanted to say I support the measure. And I ask my colleagues to do the same. Sidosmasi, Madam Speaker.
Buen provecho, Senator San Nicolas. To close on the motion, Speaker Chalai, you recognize.
Thank you again, and can I just take this time to really thank my colleagues who have gone out there into the field and helped to distribute food and commodities to people, and really gone and moved those trees that are blocking the Manamco's cars from getting out. And to in our community, especially our mayors, our frontliners. I'm so grateful to them. And like when we passed we passed the bill for the 50 million in response to the emergency, in response to the typhoon, it was quite upsetting to hear the mayor beg or to ask 6 days after the typhoon, where's the water? And so while we've gone out and tried to make these efforts, this money's sitting here. They've got perhaps, new plans of how to distribute it, but I say let's just get it back out there as originally intended to the nonprofits that have been doing this work all along. And for your background, so this original legislation was passed in April 2021 and got tied up in procurement since then, tied up in delays, perhaps incompetence at some point. I don't know. But I want to thank my colleagues for standing up and saying, yeah, if we can get food out by this small measure, let's do it. And the reason why we're giving it to public health is because public health is the one who we have put in charge of actually procuring shelters on a daily basis. They procure all our shelters, our family shelters, our women's shelters, our children's shelters, our men's shelters. And they've done that. And these are the people who have responded to their calls. These are the actual people who are putting up the shelters on Guam and who are servicing our homeless on a daily basis. The actual organizations who we can trust. We've never heard of a scandal of the Catholic Social Services taking food money and buying a Mercedes or anything like that. In fact, we've only heard for their continued calls for more food and for the legislature to pay more attention to the other people that they serve, the manamko, those with disabilities. They are taking care of all the people, like my colleague said, in Guam, who the government of Guam is not. Where we have these gaps, we have contracted them to do it in some cases, and in some cases, these organizations are doing it on their own. And so this is just to help them and help the people who are lining up for food, who are worried about children. I'm very much concerned about children being hungry. So that's why I had originally, put language in specifying children, but I hope they can use their common sense, and I trust that these organizations will. And that's why I want to get this money to them right now. So, sorry, something wrong?
Please proceed with the motion.
Okay, thank you. Again, so thank you to all those on our front lines and to all of the people of Guam who have contributed to those nonprofits who are raising money to build shelters, to clean up homes at Zero Down and other areas and all over Guam, to everyone. I hope I can share this. I didn't ask him his permission, but my brother on Father's Day yesterday was sharing with us. He works for the Army Corps. And he said his big boss from, I'm not even sure where, but he says this guy is way up there, came to Guam and said he responds to all emergencies and that he's never seen anything like Guam, where the entire community pulls together to help each other out and to clean up. He said he's seen places where they wait for the government to do that. So I'm just so very grateful to all of you and to all of the people of Guam who have been doing this. So again, thank you to my colleagues who've spoken on the bill. I'd like to move to add some sponsors, including you, Vice Speaker Tina Munoz-Barnes, our Legislative Secretary Amanda Shelton, Senator Joseph Agustin, Senator Minority Leader Frank Blas, Senator Chris Barnett, and Senator Will Parkinson, Senator Dwayne St. Nicholas, and Senator Tom Fisher, and Senator Jesse Lujan. And I want to thank him for his work, and all of the senators who've really been out there. Thank you, Madam.
On that motion, any objections? Hearing none. Motion carries.
So I move to
Speaker.
place Bill 137-37 COR as amended on the floor to the third reading.
On that motion, Are there any objections? Seeing or hearing none, motion carries. Speaker Terlahi, I recognize you on the next bill. 139-37. Madam Speaker, you are recognized.
Thank you very much. This bill, again, does not impact the funds of the government. It takes that law
On
that
the
we
motion,
passed.
Madam Speaker.
I'm sorry, yeah. This is a motion. Sorry. I'd like to move Bill number 139-37 COR, which is an act to amend Public Law 37-17 to ensure that Liheslaturan Guåhan can utilize funds from the $50 million general fund appropriation for emergency response expenses in response to Typhoon Mawar for purposes specific to supplemental funding to farmers, fishermen's co-op recovery efforts, power generation for GDOE school facilities, and the establishment of shelters and temporary housing subsidies. Again, this I didn't think should be necessary, but I'm putting it in law because in our original law we said food, water, sheltering, health and medical, all these things. But again, there's been a delay, and I want it to be crystal clear. I don't think we can afford any more delays. I want to make sure that this is clear that what the legislature intended, that these things would be covered. And while we continue to support the governor and all of our frontliners in their response to this recovery, to the typhoon. Oh, sorry, so the amendment I'm adding to the law that we just passed in the prior emergency session says, specifically, Liheslaturan is authorized to utilize this appropriation for supplemental funding to farmers, any fishermen's co-op recovery efforts, the purchase and installation of power generators for Guam Department of Education school facilities, and the establishment of shelters and temporary housing subsidies. And as my colleagues have pointed out, these funds that we appropriated, we told them, first and foremost, try to get reimbursement. We also told them, and whenever I speak to the governor, I tell her, if we have to do it without getting reimbursement, then we have to do it. But some of these things have to get done. But hopefully, these all seem to fall in line with what the federal government partners and American Red Cross are also helping us with. So again, thanks to them and all their work, and to all the people of Guam. I hope that we can just specify these needs and get this done.
When Pobetsu, Speaker Terlahi, on the main motion, Senator Chris Duenas, you're recognized on the main motion.
Madam Speaker, and I certainly rise in support of Bill 139-37, as well as the other measures that have been put forward. Certainly, there's a lot of need out there. Madam Speaker, in this current fiscal year budget, actually, in the miscellaneous provisions, I passed a measure that gave $200,000 to the Fishermen's Co-op. On the basis, and at the time, there was some discussion back and forth on whether an authorization was sufficient. I believed it was. It's kind of interesting because the $50 million that we passed earlier in a prior bill was exactly the same language, an authorization. But I wanted to take this time to thank the president of the Fishermen's Co-op, Manny Duenas, who has already, through my office, emailed the director of BBMR a very comprehensive plan for the $200,000. Madam Chair, one of the major items that addresses is the issue of fuel, providing fuel for the fishermen so that they can go out and fish. And we talk about those who are needing food, absolutely. And these fishermen, particularly just the little guys, they provide a lot of much needed food for their families in the way of selling their fish, but also giving away a lot of the fish as well to their families, friends, and others who need. And so one of the major things that will be done is they've, I believe, completed all the repairs, and I believe they're signed off and certified on the ability to start allowing for fish that, or excuse me, fuel that's sold at the dock there for the fishermen to be able to go out and fish. And as well, it will ensure that they can open in July in their temporary facility. Once again, it's a very comprehensive plan that they've put forward. Every day, the 4 and 5 people that Manny has left over there working are securing everything they can secure, getting the temporary facility set up and ready to go. I personally don't think this would be necessary, but hey, I'm glad it's here. Just to really put more teeth behind the fact that that appropriation was already there. And I want to thank everyone who's trying to help in any way they can to get the Fishermen's Co-op back up and running. And I also want to take this time to thank everyone that's been doing everything that they can within this body, and all of our teams that have been out there trying to help as well. So I certainly support this measure for all of its reasons, but in particular because, like I said, the organization was not just asking for a blank check. They have very detailed operational issues that they're moving forward to get the fishermen back out there fishing and providing for their families. Tuesdays Mossy, Madam Chair.
You're very welcome, Senator Duenas. On the main motion, anyone else wishing to speak? If not, Senator Barnett, I will recognize you on the main motion.
Thank you, Madam. Yeah, definitely support this measure, and just I don't want to say annoyed, but people were talking after the typhoon, what are the senators doing? What are the senators doing? What are the senators doing? And one of the first things we did was go into emergency session and basically authorize the governor to use $50 million for this recovery. And it's been slow. Let's just be honest with each other. If you want to compare it to Pang Sung Hwa, it was a much more devastating storm, different time. We weren't as hard as we should have been back then. So these comparisons with Pang Sung Hwa, for me anyway, a little bit apples and oranges. But for about a day or two, I felt like we did something good in giving this $50 million because it's $50 million. But then when we started to go out here into the community and just see the suffering, the pain, the waiting that our people were doing, waiting in lines for gas, waiting in lines for food, for water, going on a scavenger hunt for the last 2 bags of ice in Derrida, it was just frustrating because it's similar to the situation with our schools. Money was not an issue. We gave $50 million. But then we started to hear about all these different needs. Shelters. I think a lot of us have been to the shelters. I went to a shelter at Maria Ulloa Elementary School, and God bless the hardworking GDOE employees for running that shelter with little to no resources. They hardly had running water, couldn't flush a toilet. People were showering in 55-gallon trash cans of water at 10 o'clock in the morning. The shelter was overrun with the smell of rotting garbage because, according to the shelter manager, they couldn't get anyone to come and pick up the garbage. And then we moved these people out of the shelters. And I thought, oh, wow, it's working. But where do we move them to? We moved them into a dusty warehouse in an industrial zone that had no airflow, no aircon. And we put a couple porta potties there and we blamed it on the Red Cross. When at any time, we could have told the Red Cross, you know what? Go stand in the corner and face the wall for the way you're treating our people. Anytime. We heard last week the governor and lieutenant governor come out and say, oh, we're not involved with the shelters. And then the next day they said, okay, we're going to save the day. We're still waiting. Because we gave you $50 million. And in the $50 million, the bill says right here, for emergency response expenses in response to Typhoon Mawar included but not limited to expenses related to safety, security, food. We just got done talking about a bill to give $5 million for food, water, and sheltering. It's all right there. Yeah, we sit on our noggin and we point fingers at the Red Cross when nothing is stopping us. Money is not an issue. And our people deserve better, but maybe they don't because they're poor. Or maybe they don't because they can't vote. So yeah, I take it back. It's not a little bit irritating. It pisses me off that we as a body come into this emergency session, thoughts of power, thoughts of water. And we unlock the bank and we say, here's $50 million, help our people, por favor. And people are saying they're hungry, they're saying it's slow. I'll tell you what, the people are always right. And so yes, I rise in full support of this measure, but I just don't know why we have to do things to help our people and then we have to go back and hold our highest elected leaders' hands and show them where the need is. If you go around this island, you will see where the need is, and you won't need 15 senators to tell you how to spend $50 million to help our people.
Thank you, Senator Barnett. On the main motion. Anyone else? If not, Speaker Therese, you may close on the main motion.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and thank you to my colleagues who spoke on the bill. Again, it's one of those things that hoping not necessary, maybe a little redundant, yes. However, I want it to be crystal clear. This is the intention of the legislature. There is no intention that we are going to strictly rely on federal funding for some of these things if that funding is going to be slow and it's going to put people's health and safety in jeopardy. And the reason I did this bill is because of personal experiences, as Senator Guåhan pointed out, in the shelters. You know, I'm very grateful to all the assistants because GDOE did an awesome job, but they were really working hard while they were double duty trying to prepare their schools for the opening, and we put a lot of pressure on them for that. The Red Cross is working very hard. Their model is congregate sheltering. So we've learned, because of some of the instances in the shelter, for example, contagious disease, while they have protocol to deal with that, we as a community can also deal with that. And we can put them into shelter as necessary under the circumstances. And I think that's what we have to look at in all these situations, that, you know, where money was supposed to go to take care of the transition from the Fishermen's Co-op to its temporary facility while we used bond money to rebuild the co-op. I was told the money didn't get there. And so I don't want these people, again, they've got lots of lives in their hands, farmers. We don't want any delays. I want it very clear, this $50 million, if you find it that the farmers lost crops, we've already got in law lost crop statutes, then by all means compensate them. We're in a food crisis, it seems. Can't get the food out there to the people that need it. We are very reliant at this point because of the loss during the typhoon on importing food, all of it. I put power generators for DOE because although DOE is supposed to take care of all of their own needs, we were using them as shelters, and some of them, they closed the shelters in the middle of the storm, Typhoon Condition 1. Because of generators not working, generators not in place, and other complications. But that was the one I heard. And so I'm so grateful to FEMA for their 100 generators. I still have asked for a list of where the 100 have been placed around Guam. And I'm grateful that they had that capability. It's very scary that we on our own did not. It was those generators that powered up our water wells, some of them, 10, they said. I think they've also put some in other critical areas. Even our hospital, all these areas in great need. I don't think the need has ended. I don't think I'm just trying to urge again by this measure that we move as fast as possible, that we not, that where if it's, we're talking about living conditions and food and sheltering, that reimbursement or not, we go for that where we can. But for immediate response, the government of Guam, we can, you know, I know that we can do this. We have seen this done in other storms. The mayors know how to do it. They're still asking for resources. They say they ask over and over, some of them, and they get resources, yes, but it's just that delay that I'm asking to refocus and avoid if possible. So that's why I'm asking that we amend our previous law in this small way, hoping that that will get the message across. Madam Speaker, and thank you again to my colleagues for their patience.
On the motion to place, Madam Speaker? Sorry.
I move to place Bill number 139-37 on the, I'm sorry, may I make some amendments? Can I add those who spoke on the bill in the order that they spoke, and also you, Vice Speaker, as co-sponsors of the bill? And
On that motion, any objections? Hearing none, motion carries.
I'd like
Thank
to move Bill number 139-37 COR as amended on the floor to the third reading.
Thank you. On that motion, are there any objections? Hearing none, motion carries. I'm going to take a moment's recess.
back from recess. Sorry. We're back from recess. We're still on second reading. We're now on bill number 134-37 COR. Senator Parkinson, you are recognized.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I'd like to make a motion to waive the committee of the whole requirement for Bill 134-37 COR. I feel it would be redundant as we have already spoken with BBMR and we know there is $11 million in the rainy day fund and I'm only asking for 2.
There's a motion notwithstanding the rules to waive the committee of the whole for bill number 134-37 COR. On that motion, is there any objection? Is there an objection? Please raise your hand. Okay. Yeah, there's an objection. So on the motion, please raise your hand if you support the motion to waive the committee of the whole on bill number 134-37. Motion carries.
Madam Chair, I'd like to make a motion to move bill number 134-37 to the second reading file for discussion.
Please proceed.
Alrighty, so bill number 134-37 is an act to appropriate the sum of $2 million from the rainy day fund to farmers for crop damages program established pursuant to Chapter 64A, Title 5 of the Guam Code annotated. So the way this process is supposed to work, as the law was written by the late Senator Ben Pangilinan, is that when a disaster happens, Department of Ag is supposed to go out there and get signups for disaster relief, and based on the signups for disaster relief, 15 days is supposed to transmit a request to the legislature for farm assistance. And $2 million is what we will need to help these farmers recover. We could take this money potentially from the $50 million we authorized the governor to do in transfer authority, but I would rather not do that because even if we were to go that route, we would take that $2 million somewhere away from the general fund somewhere else. At least from this one, we have an identified funding source, the rainy day fund, and it's already here and ready to go. This is what it's for. It is for a literal rainy day to help these farmers recover. As far as the farmer recovery goes, the way the farmer program works is it works in 3 phases. The first phase is they help out these certified, bona fide commercial farmers. And then the second phase is bona fide subsistence farmers. And then after that is for anybody else who is a farmer that is not one of the first 2 designations and then the order they sign up for. So this isn't just for the bona fide farmers. This amount could potentially help also those who are unregistered and falling through the cracks. Not only are we required to do this by law, I think we are required to do this as a moral obligation to our people. These people need our help, and as anyone who's ever done any sort of farming can know, by statute, the most any single farmer could collect is $20,000. And that was in 1997 money. So I would almost consider looking if we could raise that amount, but if we can't, in the meantime, I would be just happy with them getting this $2 million as a starting point. We have discussions about giving food assistance in the tune of $5 million to people in general. But we got to remember the food producers themselves. I've been sent pictures of people in their chicken farms and their co-ops and their farms, and the devastation is real. 90+% of these farmers have lost their crops. And in the past, when we've done this, to our shame, it has taken us a long time to get these people paid out and made whole again to begin their recovery. And so that's why I was very adamant about getting this on the emergency session because we want to begin this process as soon as possible so people can start being made whole now. I ask my colleagues to please support me in this appropriation of $2 million to help fund the crop loss compensation program. These farmers are waiting for relief, and we need to provide it to them. And with that, Madam Speaker, I yield the rest of my time. Thank you.
Thank you, Senator Parkinson. On the bill, 134-37, is there anyone who'd like to be recognized? Vice Speaker, you're recognized, and then Senator Brown.
Promise, Madam Speaker, I'll keep it short. I just want to say I rise in support of Bill number 134-37 as sponsored by the good senator, giving the funding for this measure to the farmers for the damages and the program that's been already established that's in statute. I want to say even taking the $2 million from the rainy day fund is literally why the rainy day fund was initiated to begin with, is making sure that if there was a need for our community, that this kind of funding could support efforts like that. So in that effort, with that effort, I want to say that I stand and rise in full support for this because it will truly help the crop loss funding compensation program that already exists, and our farmers, Madam Speaker, truly need it. If you've had the opportunity, Madam Speaker, like a lot of us have in this August body, to help our residents in the community from this devastating typhoon, some would say it's a Category 4. I must disagree, because I personally believe that it was much stronger than that. And just being able to go around the different villages around the island and sharing our assistance, there were a lot of farmers that lost a lot. And a lot of them are just trying to get back to some kind of normalcy, and this could probably go a long way for them because they usually don't ask for much. And when we look at the need for our crops and to support our farmers, and as far as food sustainability and making sure that food supply chain is in order, this is one way that this August body can support those efforts. So I want to thank the good author for introducing this legislation, and I hope that I can also will support, but be a part of the co-sponsorship. Sana Masi.
Sinamasi. Senator Brown on the bill.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I wanted to ask the sponsor with regards to this appropriation. What efforts has he reviewed with the Farm Services Agency, which is a federal entity on Guam that
Yes,
exists?
I'm sorry, Senator Brown, sorry. Could audio just raise the volume or something? It's hard to hear. Thank you. Please proceed, Senator Brown. It's hard to hear today, yeah. Thank you. Please proceed.
I've never been accused of having difficulty in speaking, but I will try again. I wanted to ask if the sponsor would yield with regards to this particular bill and inquire what awareness does he have of the efforts by the Farm Services Agency, which is a federal entity that exists full-time on Guam, has a local staff that actually works full-time with addressing compensation to farmers in times of need, such as this typhoon, with regards to crop damage and compensation to our farmers, which again is paid for by the federal government.
Would the sponsor yield to the question?
As far as federal crop loss programs, they are separate from whatever we are doing here locally. A lot of the federal programs require a lot of documentation that maybe some of our farmers locally don't necessarily have themselves, and so this crop loss compensation program, I believe, as it was originally instituted, was put in to help catch those gaps that the federal programs didn't catch themselves.
Thank you, Senator Parkinson. Senator Brown.
Madam Speaker, there's no one here that doesn't want to help our people. I mean, none of us are removed from the realities of what has happened from this particular typhoon. And many of us who've been here, I was not here for Karen. I know our parents and all the older members of our community often talk of Karen in their experience, but everything since then I've experienced, I think many of us have. I don't think there's anyone here that cares more or any less for the challenges that our people are experiencing. And I've had the opportunity to work with farmers and the Farm Services Agency, and I don't know if the sponsor is as aware. I'm not aware from his response that he is as aware of this program, but actually bona fide farmers on Guam actually are registered with this federal program, are fully aware of it. The whole intent of one of their major missions is to assist during these specific. I'm sorry that you can't hear. I can't assist you with that unless you want audio to take a break here and
No,
address
that's better.
my comments.
That's better now. Just lift it up.
I have no ability to control the microphone from where I'm standing. But I think we also need to look at these federal programs because, my dear colleagues, if we're talking now and we're concerned about the fact that maybe this is only one of a number of other typhoons that we're going to experience, I want to make sure that every dollar that's being spent is actually getting out to the people that really need it. The sad reality is that the opportunity for abuse, unfortunately, exists. And that's where the concern is making sure that those that actually are farmers out there are properly compensated, that they're registered, that the public's money, the people's money is going where it needs to go. And I think when we just jump in without looking at these issues carefully, without getting proper financial assessment, because the majority of members in this body today choose to waive that and determine that today this is an emergency, that we're not being responsible with the expenditures of the people's money. We can still accomplish the objective of ensuring that our people that need it get the money, those that are legitimately performing and making a living or having subsistence farming to receive this benefit. But that is not what we're doing today. We're just simply thinking that everything we're going to do is throwing money at it, making sure our names are at the top of these bills so that we can get all the credit. My dear people of Guam, make sure we get the credit that our names are up here is a priority. And in all of this, we have no guarantee of ensuring that our people are going to properly get the support they need, and that there's not going to be abuse, and there's not going to be misuse and misspending and corruption that's going to happen, because we want to remove anything and everything that we think is going to require any standard. We spend all this time putting requirements and standards in place, and all of a sudden, you don't even have to be a bona fide farmer or prove that you are, but we're going to give you money anyway. And we're going to take the money out of the rainy day fund because we determined today, without financial feedback, that we're just going to take it. Let's not kid ourselves, colleagues, when we were in here a few weeks ago, unless you heard differently from BBMR than what I heard. Maybe I got to go back and repeat the session and review it. But I never got the impression from BBMR in any way, shape, or form that there was $50 million to begin with. Did you hear that? Did BBMR come and say they had $50 million? That we were appropriating the title? It looked good on paper, but that was not the reality, at least according to them. Unless the administration is going to come back and say, oh, we definitely have the $50 million. That we're not, I heard them saying we were in deficit spending. Did you not hear that? Or maybe I, didn't comprehend. Maybe I just didn't understand. We should get an Academy Award. We really should. We just need to get dressed up for the occasion. I just think in this particular case, and my concern, and it's not because I don't care about the farmers of Guam. I've worked with the farmers of Guam. That's why I know about FSA. That's why I know about NRCS and the federal programs that are administered out there that benefit our farmers on a regular basis that participate in these programs. FSA wants more applicants. So I think we need to be a little more careful to look, are we duplicating in some efforts? Because I wouldn't want someone to get compensated from FSA and then at the same time the government of Guam is compensating for the same crops. How are we verifying that? That's the concern with all of this. And when we just want to hop, skip, and jump and not even have the fiscal people come down here and show the people the real reality. We can pretend that we're helping the people of Guam, but really when you get out there, where's the accountability at the end of the day to make sure that the food and the resources and the funding to help our fishermen and our farmers are actually getting out there and they're actually receiving these benefits? And what's the mechanism to make sure that happens? But no, we don't want to talk about that. That's too much work. No, we don't want to spend another minute here than we have to, of course. Why would we want to do that? Colleagues, I don't mind the good efforts and the caring. I hate the hypocrisy. That's what bothers me when I see this. My dear people of Guam, we all know our people are suffering. We don't need to go out far to see that. We have it in our own homes and our own families. I just think we need to be a little more responsible with how we spend public money. You called us in for one thing, and my goodness, we just had, oh, it's all being thrown on our desk. We have all these other emergencies. And yet we cannot take the time to ensure fiscal accountability and how these programs are going to be administered to make sure that the money goes where it needs to go. So that's my reservation. And I'm sorry, in asking the question, I don't think the sponsor adequately, at least in my view, provided a good explanation with regards to his awareness of FSA. Because this is not a fly-by-night drive into Guam for the storm and then drive out. They're here year-round. They're here every day. And there are our own local people that actually work there that operate FSA. And I think we should maximize every opportunity to get every federal dime that we can. And I'd rather do that in those areas than use local funds that are dwindling. And that's the concern I have. I see our local funds dwindling. I've talked about that since last fiscal year, the year before that. And now here we are in the third year since I've been here, and boy, we just, we are just wanting to appropriate without ensuring the funds are there, and without ensuring that the funds are going to effectively get to the people that are most in need. So I just want to raise those concerns because I think they're very valid concerns. They're not as popular. I can't go write in a press release, gee, isn't it a wonderful thing, my dear people of Guam, I care so much, more than anybody else here. I'm going to cry. But again, I just think we need to be more upfront and ensure accountability with how public funds are being spent, because history has shown we've not always been as effective with regards to public funds and government funds and the people's money as we should be. With that, I have no further comment with regards to this bill.
Thank you, Senator Brown. Senator Fisher, and then Senator Blas.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I would like to just begin by congratulating my friend from Chalampago who just spoke for bringing some truth before us and speaking truth to us. I would like to follow up on her comments, and I would wonder if the sponsor would yield to a question.
State your question, Senator Fisher.
Yes, thank you. To what extent did he consider federal crop insurance program when drafting this bill?
Could you please restate that?
Certainly, ma'am. To what extent...
Can we get the sponsor in the room, please?
Do you want me to go ahead or wait?
No, you wait.
Madam Speaker, I think the sponsor may have abandoned his bill.
You may proceed, or if you'd like your question answered, you can wait for him. It's up to you.
Well, I'll go ahead and I'll restate the question, and if, well,
Here he is.
Here we go. Okay.
Okay, so Senator Fisher, yeah, please state your question for the sponsor.
Okay. I'll just wait till he gets. Shall I proceed, Madam Speaker?
Yes, please proceed.
Thank you very much. My question is, if my friend will yield to the question is as follows. To what extent did he consider the impact of the federal crop insurance program here on Guam? I know it covers about 86% of the acreage, and I was just wondering to what extent he has considered that in drafting the bill.
Would the sponsor yield to that question?
Yes, I know federal crop insurance exists, but as far as I'm concerned, as much help as we could get to supplement that federal crop insurance, the better. These people need substantial amount of help, and this will go not all the way, but it will go some of the way towards making them whole for as much as it is. But yes, I have considered federal crop programs, and one of the things I considered is, previous speaker was correct that yes, a lot of the bona fide farmers do qualify for federal help, but a lot of the unregistered people who are not bona fide farmers and who are also going may potentially be covered by this program, the people who potentially fall through the cracks, this is what helps address that problem for some of our local farmers that are not federally qualified.
Thank you. Will the sponsor yield to another question?
Please state your question.
Yes, thank you very much, ma'am. Does the sponsor agree that this program would be better structured if the $2 million served as a secondary insurer to our farmers? In other words, they need to look to their primary insurer first, and to the extent they are not covered, they can then apply for money out of the $2 million.
Would the sponsor yield?
As to what is the best way to serve the community, that is always a question up in the air. But what I know is that by statute, that they are required to make this ask of the legislature, and the legislature is required to appropriate it after the fact. If there's a better way to do this program, I am all ears about it, but I am not trying to reinvent the wheel now. I'm just trying to put forward the wheels of motion for legislation that has already been passed and is already in the books.
Yes, ma'am. Yes, ma'am. I thank the gentleman for that response. To be clear, many of these farmers are covered by federal insurance. To be clear, many of these farmers are eligible for federal assistance in these programs. I appreciate very much the sponsor's desire to help the farmers, but to a large extent, the help is already there. Some farmers, I agree with him, may not be able to recover either under a contract of insurance or otherwise, and that might be where the $2 million comes in to help these ladies and gentlemen who've suffered damage under the typhoon. But that is the nature of a secondary insurance market. You look to your primary insurer, in this case, the federal crop insurance program, you look to them first, and then you look to your secondary insurer. It seems to me that this would be a most responsible expenditure of limited local dollars, primarily because individuals who otherwise would have gotten nothing now can take advantage of the $2 million pot of cash, while those who are insured are already covered. And that just seems to me a more responsible expenditure of our funds. Thank you very much, ma'am.
Thank you, Senator Fisher. Senator Blas.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Unfortunately, Madam Speaker, this is probably why it was best that we had gone into the Committee of the Whole, because there are obviously a number of different questions that need to be asked and receive appropriate answers for them other than just conjecture and assumptions, and what we would assume and what we want to happen. I too have a couple of questions that I'd like to know if the author would be able to yield, and I'll go, by my question. My first question, Madam Speaker, is basically we are talking about a program for a crop loss compensation program that should exist or that exists in the Department of Agriculture. If the author of the legislation has any idea as to how much is in that program right now.
Would the sponsor yield to the question?
I believe that there is not enough money in the program right now to meet the demand of the 207 farmers who have signed up for the program.
Senator Blas, you may proceed.
I don't think, Madam Speaker, I would prefer a little bit more specificity in as far as what that amount is. Because then it goes to my second question, but I would like to ask my second question once I get specifics about how much is in that fund.
Are you asking the sponsor to yield again to the same question?
Get the specificity on my first question. How
Would the sponsor
much
yield to the question?
is in that fund?
My understanding, sir, is that there is no money in that fund because the way the law is written is that we do sign-ups first and then the Department of Agriculture makes a request for appropriation from the legislature.
I really don't want to get into a debate on this thing, Madam Speaker, but the first response was the money is insufficient, is inadequate. The second response is there's no money.
No money is insufficient, sir.
Please proceed, Senator Blas.
Well, ma'am, Madam Speaker, because it goes to my next question. Where did we come up with $2 million?
Could you please?
That's my question.
Yeah, could you please repeat it?
Where did we come up with $2 million?
Where did we come up with? Would the sponsor yield to that question? Where did we come up with $2 million?
The number of $2 million was based on the 207 farmers, and we looked at statute, and every farmer was not obligated, but they were entitled to up to $20,000 each. So we would use that as a base to be able to cover the 207 farmers, as well as some extra money for people who are not bona fide farmers, because this program not only covers bona fide farmers and subsistence farmers, but also non-registered farmers if there is money available afterwards.
And thank you for the response, Madam Speaker. And therein lies some of the flaws in here, because you see there is a specific pool of individuals that the program can provide funding to. To expand it and not to be able to say that in this bill, it just opens the door to anything else. So how are we practicing fiduciary fiscal responsibility, and what criteria are we going to use to be able to do this? If you say that past the program, we're going to expand it to others, $2 million, Madam Speaker, is not going to cover 207 individuals at $20,000 each, and then thinking a little bit more. Madam Speaker, I don't want to, for lack of a better term, critical or concerned with this bill. Had a previous bill not been heard with the assurances and with some measure, some degree of measure, to be able to provide compensation to them. As well, that, there are programs that are available through not just, your National Crop Insurance Program, but basically through FEMA and through SBA. And granted that most farmers if not, will not be able to be eligible for SBA programs. But then they can take that denial letter from SBA back to FEMA and still be open for grants and opportunities. We got to give this opportunity, again, I understand the need to be able to help the farmers. But the author himself recognizes that the way that the program is written is that the assessment has to be made by the program, then come to the legislature to be able to ask for the funding. It's not addressed here. It's not addressed here. Okay? So, if not properly addressed here, it's subject to ambiguous interpretations that the money may never get to the farmers. Because we were too ambiguous in where this money is going to be coming from, who this money is going to be going to, and then what are those stopgap measures to ensure that if the individual receives money from here, that he's no longer eligible or they cannot receive money elsewhere. Or if he receives this money, he's not eligible for other programs. We've got to be very careful when we're talking about this. And as much as we want to be able to get to them quicker, I don't think that this is the vehicle to be able to do that. There's still some language that's necessary in this legislation to ensure that. Because right now, as it stands, granted, it's got a notwithstanding clause to this. But even in the notwithstanding clause, and we open this up to even more. Let's say that, we give the $2 million, but actually, based on the accounts, 270 farmers at $20,000, it's not enough money. Then, how is that chosen? How then is a farmer chosen? Okay? So, I applaud the author, for wanting to be able to do this, and it's a great idea. And the idea is, that's what this body is for, to come up with the ideas and see what can work. But in this case here, great idea, it just needs a little bit more work. Thank you, Madam Speaker.
Thank you, Senator. On the bill, is there anyone who'd like to be recognized on the bill? Senator Nicholas, you are recognized.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I applaud the author of the bill. I'm a businessman, and farming is a kind of like a low margin type business. You can only charge so much before you're starting to compete with the eggs that we import, and then you probably not make any money. I was looking, thank goodness for Google, because you could actually look up what kind of programs are out there for farmers who have crop damage or loss due to hurricanes, typhoons, floodings. And they actually give you a loan program, being that rising interest rates and all of that stuff might make this, putting our farmers on loans might not be an appropriate time at a time like this. And I think the measure to give $2 million to our farmers now is something necessary. We driving down Tumon, you see the devastation. There's no trees the trees have no leaves. I got pictures from a farmer who pretty much lost everything, and he provides eggs to hotels and restaurants, and some of the stuff he actually gives away to people in need. And the opportunity arises here where we can actually try to help these farmers, and I rise in support of it. I think it's a good measure. I think It's money that's sitting there, and I think this will go a long way to helping our farmers and to those who have lost livestock during the storm. I too, I also raised some chickens, maybe to the annoyance of my neighbor. But I did too lose some of my chickens too, and we produce eggs, and I've purchased some cages so that next time, maybe when we do have something like this, I won't lose my chickens. So I think it's important that we help our farmers now, and maybe we can get them back on track so that they can produce the eggs and the other crops. Somebody told me that there's no doni out there anymore. You go to Payless and there's no hot peppers. Can't eat any chorizo spokpek without hot peppers. So let's get these farmers the necessary aid they need. And I asked my colleagues to support the measure. I support it, and I applaud the author. I guess that's all I have to say about that. Thank you, Madam Speaker.
Thank you, Senator. On the bill, is there anyone who would like to be recognized on the bill? On the bill, Senator Barnett, you're recognized.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I get a lot of the concerns of the previous speakers, and I know that in the $50 million that we authorized, whether it's really $50 million or not, that there was a nod to crop assistance. But I also commend the author of this measure because, yeah, our farmers, if you look around at the devastation and the massive amount of green waste that's out there, I think it's something like 90% of the debris from the typhoon is green waste. Imagine what that did to our people's doni, our people's eggplant, our people's avocado, our people's mango. There's no more mango season. They rescheduled mango festival to the end of July, but I don't know what mango we're going to have. And I just had the thought while I was sitting here listening to some of the previous speakers, you know, we were willing to give $15 million to the businesses, and we asked far fewer questions. We're talking about farmers here, right? And while some of them may avail of a lot of these federal programs, some of them may not. This was a program very similar to what we saw during the COVID-19 pandemic, where you had your bona fide farmers avail of this assistance. And then you had Tanana, who, you know, maybe sells alligator to the Mexican restaurant to supplement her income, you know, not much, $200, $300 a month. Or maybe you're, you know, Situn Ben, who has his eggplant that he's going to sell to the Korean restaurant. Same thing, but he's not bona fide. It's pretty bona fide to me, though, because he's doing what he can to make ends meet. But he cannot make those ends meet anymore because matai crops. That's one thing we can be sure of. With a storm like Typhoon Mawar, there are no crops left. There's no more doni. There's no more cucumber. My Uncle Raymond, who sometimes makes a little extra selling his avocado, both of the trees completely destroyed. And yes, the fruit fell down on the ground, but couldn't get to it because of the down power lines. Why did the Department of Agriculture announce this program with no funding? I don't know. But is there a need? Absolutely, definitely. Will it be met by the federal government? Sure. I'm pretty sure some of the needs of some of the farmers will be met. Others will fall through the cracks, like Tanana and Tunben. And if there's some money left over from the $2 million after we help somebody, so be it, because the federal government kicked down. But I support this measure. I support its intent. And I think it's something that we're here to do, you know? We're talking about, and I'm not saying $2 million is chump change, but to people who lost everything, well, it may seem like a lot of money to us. To them, it's quite simply not enough. So, thank you, Madam Speaker.
Thank you, Senator. On the bill, anyone else on the bill?
On the main motion, at this time, I will recognize Speaker Therese Terlahi on the main motion.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. And I very much listened to the comments of the previous speakers, and I thought they were all very good, very insightful, and the concerns were very well placed. I too was trying to find the program in the rules, or the rules of the program, because their announcement does not say how much each farmer is going to get. The law that was passed does not say, or you know, the law in the code does not say how much each farmer is going to get, or any of the details of who's going to get. But it was in the rules, and I found old rules that are printed in our GAR, published. But the sponsor of the bill has showed me that subsequent to that GAR that I'm looking at, there was another law passed by the 22nd Guam Legislature to update those rules, and that's where that $20,000 comes from, because the previous rules had only given $1,500. So now I understand where this $20,000 come from, what they're going to actually compensate for, and they're very specific on which crops and other damages will be compensated, and who gets compensated first. So I agree with the notion that, you know, the program as passed by previous lawmakers is going to provide monetary relief to farmers and ranchers for their losses to crops, livestock, and property due to the typhoon. That's exactly the purpose of this statute. And when they put out their call for farmers to come in and claim, they gave them a very short time frame, which was 10 days. That's because of the law, again, that put a 2-week limit on it. And they, at that time, announced in their announcement that for further, in an effort to support farmers and ranchers with all possible programs available, USDA Farm Services Agency will also be on site to provide information about available federal farmer rancher programs. And as the previous speaker, our minority leader, also discussed, there are, I know farmers whose farms have already been inspected by FEMA, and I'm not sure about the SBA. I know that that's a component that we're supposed to go to SBA first, so perhaps they were denied. However, yeah, so of course, I think ideally, our money is saved for those who are not covered by any other program. But I think it's consistent with the knowledge of legislators before us, that they were aware that there are federal programs, and in their effort to cover, you know, everyone or expand the program, they said this would cover their program. Our local program would cover registered subsistence farmers and unregistered commercial and unregistered subsistence farmers after the commercial farmers in good standing are processed. So, of course, that's what we're hoping by this, is to get it to those unregistered, and the subsistence farmers, not the commercial farmers. I mean, also them, but to these other farmers who we know have had great loss and who also contribute to food production on Guam, and who have been greatly impacted. So, I don't know if the law on the books allows the Department of Agriculture to bypass a farmer because they have received federal. But it does look like it was anticipated that there would be federal assistance also available to these farmers. I would like to trust that they are implementing the program exactly as it is written. The rules are very detailed and are consistent with the law, apparently. And I think this is the same program that has been in place, actually, for previous disasters. So I do hope these farmers are able to avail of all the federal programs available to them. And I do hope that this money will get to some of the farmers who are not able to avail of federal programs. And perhaps our laws in this regard, you know, can be made better if we want to preclude those who've made federal claims from getting local claims. But one of the previous speakers brought out that in COVID, we had the same situation. We had SBA, we had other federal programs available to businesses, and we did not count that as a criteria for them to be excluded from our local grants, our local ARP-funded GATA grants to businesses as well. So, of course, I did include the provision farmers in the previous bill because I'm hoping the governor can use her discretion. If she thinks we don't have to use the rainy day fund, to fund this, and because she's got the $50 million available to her, then by all means, I think she should use the $50 million. That's exactly what it's there for as well. So hopefully, they can make that determination. But the most important part of this bill and the previous bill is that it moves forward immediately. So the farmers have already complied with that 10-day, very short time frame to apply. I think they're supposed to get their report done in 5 days from the Department of Agriculture back to them, whether they are eligible or not, and so that they can plan. And I know I read somewhere from UOG's publication that they're advising farmers, you know, get some of these things in the ground now before the rainy season, and of course don't get some things in the ground before rainy season because that won't work. But I just want them to be able to know how to plan and to very wisely choose what they're going to do in the next few days or weeks, because I'm sure every week is crucial prior to the rainy season. Sizus Masi.
Buen Pobetsu, Speaker Terlai. Anyone else on the main motion? If not, Senator Parkinson, you may close.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I have heard the criticisms of some of my colleagues here today asking, not asking, but commenting and opining that it seems like the procedures of this program and this plan seem kind of half-baked and not really well thought out. But I would just like to remind all of my colleagues, this is not my program. This is an already existing program on the books. And I believe the last time we used it was during Typhoon Dolphin. So and we've used this mechanism for previous typhoons and previous incidences. So this is not a new thing. There is a difference between local crop losses and federal crop loss insurance. And many of our locals, in fact, I'd hazard to say a majority of our locals probably are not signed up federally. And that is part of the reason why these programs exist. They could be not registered federally, but they are registered locally. The procedure of this is not new. The procedure of this has been around since the 90s. The disaster happens. They get sign-ups. They ask the legislature for the appropriation. This is that appropriation. There are 207 farmers. That's who we're helping. That's who this is going to. And anybody afterwards, subsistence farmers and the non-registered, if we could help any more after that. There is a funding source. I appreciate Speaker Terlahi for amending her previous law on the $50 million so that if we needed to, we could fund this program through the transfer authority we gave the governor. But even though if we can do that, I would prefer that we use the rainy day fund, because if we were to use the transfer authority, she still has to find that money from other programs in the government, from other places, and I would rather not cannibalize the general fund any more than we're already, especially because the rainy day fund, this is what it's for. This is what it's for. We have a rainy day fund, and we have a law written in 1993. I just want to read some of the names of the people that unanimously passed this bill. The primary co-sponsor was the late Senator Ben Pangilinan. Other people who co-sponsored it were Joe T. San Agustin and Ted Nelson. People that voted for it, it was unanimously passed by Senator Blas, Senator Deerking, Senator Camacho, Senator Ada, Senator Uggan, Senator Areola, Senator Bordallo, Senator Gutierrez, Senator Lujan, Senator Don Parkinson, Senator Regis, Senator Santos, Senator Shimizu, Senator Bamba, Senator Brooks, Senator Manabusin, Senator Tanaka, and Senator Umpunko. Now, I find it disrespectful to the work of previous legislatures to attribute their work as shoddy when this is the process that has been in place for decades. People have been asking me, are you aware of federal programs? Are you aware of federal program this? Are you aware of federal program that? I have to ask some of the people in this body, are you aware of the local programs? This is a program from the 90s, and everyone is acting like I just created this from whole cloth. We are the legislature. By statute, this is our job. The Department of Ag requests an appropriation, and we make that determination on whether or not to give it to them. This is why we have a bona fide farmer program for incidences like this after disasters. I'd like to quote the late Senator Pangilinan in his committee report. Senator Pangilinan stated, he supported attending to the needs of Guam's farmers because farmers work hard in the field, and are conscious about their own financial obligations and in meeting their obligations to this community. They recognized that back then, that these farmers have always done right by us. And it is our obligation, nay, duty, to do right by these farmers. Let's get the farmer the help that they need. My only regret is that I could not appropriate more. With that, I yield the rest of my time, and I ask my colleagues to please support this bill. Thank you.
Senator Parkinson, can you move the bill to the third reading voting
I'd
file?
like to make a motion to move the bill to the third reading file.
The number, read the number.
And the bill number is 134-37 COR.
On that motion, are there any objections? Seeing or hearing none, motion carries. Thank you, Senator Parkinson. Senator Chris Barnett, you are recognized on your bill.
Thank you. Thank you, Madam. Bill 136-37 is a very simple.
Wait,
Yes. Oh, I'd like to move 136-37 to the third reading file and discuss, please.
please proceed.
Thank you, Madam. It's Bill 136-37. It's a very simple bill that I believe is the final tool in the toolkit that could bring very complicated set of decades-old problems to an end, finally. I want to thank my colleagues again for their unanimous support of what eventually became Public Law 37-4. And this measure that I'm now discussing would really, I think, give the Guam Department of Education the last possible tool that it needs to come into compliance with Public Law 37-4. And what this bill does is it allows the use of emergency procurement procedures to enable the Guam Department of Education to comply again with Public Law 37-4 in the wake of the passage and ensuing destruction that Typhoon Mawar wrought on our island. And I am willing to offer this final tool because, like many of the stakeholders, students, teachers, staff, faculty, just very frustrated with the excuses that continue to come up in this conversation relative to coming into compliance with this public law that the governor allowed to lapse into law and that this body passed again unanimously. And I just want to say that before Typhoon Mawar was even a blip on the radar, the Guam Department of Education, represented by a couple of its very high-ranking deputy superintendents and at least one board member, asked to meet with me and asked me to introduce a bill to suspend Public Law 37-4 and the Guam Department of Education's compliance with it until next school year. So before this typhoon even came into the picture, I felt like the Guam Department of Education was already trying to wiggle its way out of complying with just very basic public health and safety guidelines. And then the typhoon hit. And we heard in the round table across the hall here about some of the damage that Typhoon Mawar wreaked on not just our island, but our public school system. And it was a lot of damage, but I was very optimistic that there was no severe structural damage incurred by the Guam Department of Education and the public school system. There was a lot of trees down, a lot of flooding. Some of the walkways blew away, and I'd made the joke that, well, that's going to help them get reconstructed quicker because now they don't have to tear them down. We're seeing mold throughout the schools again, but that's something that I know could be mitigated and coming into compliance with Public Law 37-4. And so this bill would allow for emergency procurement measures for 120 days, right? And I also have an amendment handy that I think would put just a little bit more teeth in this with the reporting requirements because I know that there is some risk involved with emergency procurement. But I think if there's ever a time for emergency procurement, that time is now. A lot of these funds that the Guam Department of Education plans to use to come into compliance with Public Law 37-4 have an expiration date on them. Every single hearing that we have had on this public law and the efforts to comply with it, they've brought up the P word: procurement, 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 procurement. What's preventing you from doing this? Procurement. What's preventing you from doing that? Procurement. And so I feel that it's my obligation as the oversight if they're telling me that they need one last thing in order to comply with this law, because I'm just not comfortable with kicking this can down the road. I know we've all followed the news. We all know that the Guam Board of Education passed with a 5-1 vote a resolution asking this body to further delay, as if, you know, basic health and safety sanitation conditions in our schools should be further. No, they should not be. We need to do this now or never. And so while we haven't been in official receipt of that resolution, at least to my knowledge, I don't think we've received it. This is the answer. The answer is do what we got to do to put this to bed once and for all, right? Because even in repairing the damage from Typhoon Mawar, and the Guam Department of Education saying that they don't intend to delay the opening of schools, I got to ask, I mean, what kind of schools are they willing to send our kids back to school in, right? If they don't want to come into compliance with this law, if they say the damage from the typhoon is going to make it nearly impossible, I think was the quote, and then let's together as a body help them reach the finish line with just a little nudge, a little friendly nudge, another nudge, if you will. The last nudge, I pray. And I would just, again, implore the Guam Department of Education, because we're just tired of hearing from the schools that they tell downtown what they need, and then they wait. And they wait some more. And they keep waiting. Waiting for years. And when they call downtown, what does downtown say? It's stuck in procurement purgatory. And so I think that we did a great job in passing the bill that eventually became Public Law 37-4, and I think we did it because we're all tired of the excuses. And I know that we got some smart colleagues in here, and if we let GDOE slide again, guess what? They're going to keep sliding to infinity and beyond. They will keep sliding. They're saying give us until next school year. What happens next school year? We are faced with a great opportunity to finally, once and for all, bring our schools into compliance with just the basic health and safety sanitation guidelines. And we can do that and repair damage from Typhoon Mawar. And if we do that right, we're looking at getting reimbursed from the federal government for that. And that's the emergency. Our kids don't deserve to go to classes for another day in conditions that, again, if we found these conditions in a restaurant, we would shut that restaurant down. So why are these conditions good enough to send our kids to school in? I don't think they are. And I know we've had this conversation, and we were all in agreement. And so I would just ask, beg even, the support of my colleagues to help push this measure through and give that last tool that the Guam Department of Education says they need to reach compliance with Public Law 37-4. Because if we don't, it may never happen. Let's just be honest with each other. Decades. It's always been this way. That's what they said. But we got this law passed that forces, again, that's what we have to do. We have to force their hand to come into compliance. But we also have to be reasonable in setting these goals that they say are nearly impossible. I don't think anything's impossible. especially when you got a body like this legislature willing to stand by and to give the tools that they need to get us to the top of the mountain. And so I just ask again your support. I give them this one last tool. It's like a vice grip, you know? Use that vice grip for anything. Just one last tool in the tool belt to get our schools across the finish line and to give our students the education in the facilities that they deserve. So thank you. Thank you, Madam Speaker. I also have an amendment.
Yes.
Yeah, sorry. It's in the drive. Amendment would, it's for line 9, page 2. It adds a new section 3 to the bill to read, reporting requirements. The Guam Department of Education shall report all procurement awards to the Speaker of the Liheslaturan Guåhan within 5 days, excluding Saturdays, Sundays, and Government of Guam holidays after the date of award. The report shall include the name of the awardee, the item purchased, and the services contracted, and the dollar amount of each award.
On the amendment first, anyone wishing to speak? Are there any objections? Senator Fisher, on the amendment.
Madam Vice Speaker, would the senator repeat the amendment, please?
You have it, it's on the drive,
I don't have the drive.
but you can read it again.
I don't mind at all.
Yes, please proceed.
I know my colleague Senator Fisher is not really a techie guy, so I'll go ahead and read the amendment aloud again for him. Section 3, it adds a new Section 3 under reporting requirements. The Guam Department of Education shall report all procurement awards to the Speaker of the Liheslaturan Guåhan within 5 days, excluding Saturdays, Sundays, and Government of Guam holidays after the date of award. The report shall include the name of the awardee, the item purchased, and services contracted, and the dollar amount of each award.
Thank you, Senator Barnett. Senator Fisher, you still have the floor.
Thank you very much. If I could just add an amendment to the amendment?
Yes, you may.
Okay. Thank you. The report shall include the name of the awardee, the item purchased, services contracted, and the dollar amount of each award, and evidence shall be submitted through a sworn certificate that the requirements of the emergency procurement law have been complied with.
We're going to take a moment's recess. That needs to be written down.
It's pretty
Come on
easy.
up, Senator Fisher. Imino 37 Liheslaturan Guåhan is back from recess. We do have an amendment. I will yield back to Senator Fisher on his amendment.
Yes,
Please proceed.
yes, thank you, Madam Vice Speaker. During the recess, I had an opportunity to speak with the sponsor of both the original bill as well as the amendment we just spoke about. And pursuant to that conversation, I have a new amendment, and if I may read it to the body.
Please do.
Thank you. Section 3, reporting requirements. The Guam Department of Education shall report all procurement awards to the Speaker of the Liheslaturan Guåhan within 5 days, excluding Saturdays, Sundays, and Government of Guam holidays after the date of award. The report shall include the name of the awardee, the item purchased and services contracted, the dollar amount of each award, and the information shall be submitted through a sworn or verified certificate indicating the Department of Education complied with applicable procurement rules and regulations. And that is the end of the amendment.
On that amendment, does anybody wish to speak? Senator Brown, I see your hand. Please proceed.
Thank you very much, Madam Speaker. I certainly appreciate the efforts being put forth by Senator Fisher with regards to wanting to ensure, accountability of the funds and the procedures with regards to emergency procurement. But I do want to ask him the question, though, because we're asking the Department of Education essentially to say that they have complied with all the applicable procurement rules and regulations. So essentially, they're policing themselves. What if they don't comply with it and they sign the certificate? What's the consequence to that?
Senator Fisher, would you like to yield?
I will yield.
Please proceed.
May I answer? Yes, thank you, Madam Vice Speaker. It is an official public document produced with the intent that others rely upon its accuracy. Without having the statute in front of me, I would say that submitting such a public record with the intent, falsely, with the intent that others rely upon it may be a crime, but I would, before I asked the senator who asked the question to rely upon that, I think consultation with the Guam Code Annotated would be appropriate.
Senator Brown, does that suffice?
I certainly appreciate the response, and again, I understand the intent, but ultimately I'm a little concerned if you're asking the Guam Department of Education and Police itself with regards to ensuring proper procurement. I am concerned about that, and I'll speak further when when I have the opportunity to speak on the main bill, because again, I understand the desire to assume that this somehow is going to resolve the issue. But I also want to point out, as we're aware, it is the Department of Education itself that does its own procurement. Not every government agency is given that opportunity. Most line agencies in the government of Guam are not able to do their own procurement. They have to go through the General Services Agency. So you have the administration of the Department of Education that is in charge of its own procurement, that has an inability consistently to address its own procurement issues. And now we're saying, okay, on top of that, we want you to verify or sign off that you followed all proper procedures. Before, the issue was we didn't have enough money. We didn't have enough money. The Guam Legislature and people of Guam, you've not provided us enough money to procure the things we need to address the physical infrastructure of the schools, the supplies, the resources, and all those things that are needed. And now that we are overflowing with money, the problem is we don't have the ability to procure because we have so much money. Now we can't procure the things we need because we have an issue with procurement that is something the Department of Education itself has the ability to control and address. And yet they're not successfully doing it. So I just bring this up. I appreciate, again, the efforts. I support the amendment, but I think we need to be mindful. And I have no sense of security in putting this in place that somehow we're not going to see abuse. It wasn't that long ago, colleagues, that we were looking over the whole list of emergency procurement for the pandemic. And we were raising our eyebrows because, hey, look, gosh, even the sponsor of the bill, because I enjoyed listening to his morning radio program. Who got that? Who got that contract? Oh, gosh, that's shocking. How many of those contracts did they get? They're the only business in town that provides that service or that product? Or all of a a sudden certain people that were never in the business got in the business because they got connections? Colleagues, be mindful of what we're doing under the guise that we're thinking we're helping our people and we're helping our children out there in our public school system. Because we may be contributing to more of the problem because we are allowing that we think the ultimate solution is because we don't hold people accountable when they're not capable and competent of performing their job. We reward them. We remove the floodgates. We just open the floodgates. So instead of following the process to ensure that there's no, hanky-panky and monkey business going on, we just let it all go and say, oh, that's going to be the solution. But I'll speak more on the main bill when I get to it. I'm just raising the concern that I appreciate the efforts being put forth by Senator Fisher, but I'm not going to be surprised at the next oversight hearing down the road in a few months when there's shocking revelations that all of a sudden there were not proper compliance on emergency procurement and there is funny business going on. That's not going to be surprising to me, and I'm sure I will be at that hearing, colleagues. I hope all of you will take the time to be at that future hearing, because we're going to end up finding out that those issues are going to pop up and they're going to exist. So with that, I have no further comment, but I support the amendment. I just ultimately don't think this is going to resolve the issue of concern we have with regards to accountability.
Thank you, Senator Brown. On the Fisher amendment to the Barnett amendment, Senator Joseph Agustin, I will recognize you at this time.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I think what may be missing somewhere here, or maybe a comment to this amendment, is that to address that the issue that the Attorney General's office gets involved and is involved in all emergency procurement, and that the OPA does get involved because it's in statute. I think that maybe needs to be mentioned by the author of the bill in general, because exactly what my colleague said, when we do oversight, which will come up in less than 30 days, we will be hearing Department of Education, then we'll find out more. But I'm in support of this to a certain extent, that it's re-emphasized that the Attorney General's office and the Office of Public Accountability is involved in all procurement, regardless if it's the normal or emergency. They're responsible to make sure the process is still maintained. Thank you, Madam Speaker.
Thank you, Senator San Augustine. On the Fisher amendment, Senator Dwayne St. Nicholas, you're recognized. Please proceed.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I support the amendment. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Senator St. Nicholas. Anyone else on the Fisher amendment? If not, would you like to close, Senator Fisher, or a call for the motion? Would you like to close? On the amendment, are there any objections? Seeing or hearing none, motion carries. On the Barnett amendment as amended, does anyone wish to speak? If not, are there any objections? Hearing or seeing none, motion carries. We are now on the main motion. Anyone wishing to speak on the main bill of 136-37? I see Senator San Augustine. I'll recognize you on the main bill. Please proceed.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I'm still expecting to hear the author of the bill to mention, re-emphasize the Attorney General's office and OPA. But, I do stand in support of this, and I did address this with the author, that on page 2, line 7, this section shall sunset 120 days after the date of enactment. A loud reminder to the Department of Education, you got less than 4 months. Get your act together, procure, do your emergency, because after 4 months, you don't have emergency procurement authorization no more. And when that time comes, we should be, and we will be, in the next fiscal year. And you hear me standing up and saying, you don't need any more. And the reason why I say that, Madam Chair, and I know the author will support it to a certain extent, is that when he started holding hearings, round tables and all that, and I did an oversight hearing on DOE, I think the typhoon was a blessing for them. I hate to say it that way, but it was kind of like. And the reason why is because FEMA's here. Every local fund expended to repair the school can get reimbursed by FEMA. And that was addressed to us in the committee of the whole. It could be 75-25 or 90-10 or all 100%. And the statement from FEMA was that the hope is to harden the structures here. And I'm really hoping that DOE takes advantage of this. And the reason why is because DOE is not just a school, it's a shelter. So use every federal dollar, because you got 20 million right now, plus, for DOE. We approved that. We all agreed to that, 20 million. That's a multiplier right there. Use 20 million, fix the schools. You could have 15 the next day, and then just keep going. Basically, you can almost round out to about 75 million total. And if they don't fix schools by then, because I will not support the resolution that the board passed, says to hold back on Bill 3704 of not being in compliance. No, they should have been in compliance. The only schools that may not be in compliance is only what's being used as a shelter. Everyone else, there should have been everybody showing up, and if they needed help, all they have to do is call their oversight chair who will reach to his committee members, and I honestly believe we're all going to show up and help and see what we can do. But in reference to this bill, Madam Speaker, I'm in full support of the bill. Just want to make sure that a reminder to the author that he mentions the AG is involved in emergency procurement and all procurement, and so is the OPA. Thank you, Madam Speaker.
You're very welcome, Senator San Agustin. On the main motion, anyone wishing to speak? Senator Frank Blas, Minority Leader, you are recognized at this time.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Madam Chair, I appreciate the comments that was provided by the good gentleman from GIGO, because it goes back to a concern that I brought up to the author originally about the language here. And I'm still struggling with language that's necessary. He brought up a good point, the gentleman from GIGO, in that the repair or the amounts for the repair of the schools can now become reimbursable. However, the question is going to be, were those repairs related to the typhoon, or are those repairs related to in compliance with 3704?
Is that a question to the author?
I need to pose this to the body, because this is something that we really need to think about. And make sure that there's language inclusive of this, because in my past life, in previous discussions with FEMA, it becomes an issue when the repair or the monies are being utilized to mitigate or to deal with issues pre-disaster. Now, both of them are disasters. But FEMA is here for Mawar, not for 3704. And it may become problematic in being able to separate the two, unless there's language that's precise and concise for that. Because we cannot expect FEMA to pay for repairs based on legislation that was passed prior to the disaster. And if that is going to be our expectation of this thing, that may be on false pretense. So I think that before we move forward on this, I think it's a discussion, and I've already previously discussed with the author, to give us time to make sure that we're tight in the language on this, okay? So that it does address this. And, you know, even with the emergency procurement, is this emergency procurement to come into compliance with 3704? Is this emergency procurement for repairs for damages caused by Mawar? Because it's two different things. And I just don't want us to come back and find ourselves in a legal quagmire because we didn't authorize it in that fashion, or it wasn't in the intent. So I bring that caution and I bring that concern to the body. And I know that the author right now is working with legal counsel to be able to address this. So I look forward to be able to see whether this is going to be addressed in a proper manner. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you, Senator. Anyone else on the main motion? Senator Brown, I recognize you at this time.
Thank you very much, Madam Speaker. And I certainly, as I made my comments earlier with regards to Senator Fisher's amendment, I certainly supported the original bill that became Public Law 3704, because I also agree with the main sponsor of this bill, Senator Barnett, that, you know, the time has come where at some point you really have to make a decision and say, hey, we need to start performing and we need to deliver with regards to the quality of environment and resources that we're providing for our students in our public schools. Otherwise, nothing changes, because all we do if we keep moving down the deadline is what we've seen is that the job just doesn't get done. As a matter of fact, in some circumstances for some of these schools, it's even worse. And the same ongoing back and forth between the administration within the school system, at the school sites, and the central administration at DOE, that has grown phenomenally over the years. I mean, since I was a student in public school, we had our principal, maybe a vice principal if our school was large enough. You know, we maybe knew of a director and maybe a deputy and admin staff. Now we have all kinds of titles, I can't even keep track of it. But is the quality of education that we're providing our children any better? That's a good question. That's the next question our committee really needs to look at in terms of the capability and proficiency of our students that are graduating. We have a lot of exceptional students, but we also have a larger population of students that are probably not getting the level of education that they need in our public school system. And then we ask the question, how about the physical infrastructure of these schools? Are they any better? I think looking at most recent examples, probably many of us will say no. Physical maintenance of our schools are not any better. While we argue that some of these facilities are older schools, I attended a number of elementary, at least one particular elementary school that was built in the 60s. I attended a junior high school that was built in the early 60s. And I didn't have any complaints in my time in public school with regards to the environment that I experienced as a student. But unfortunately now we're hearing about all these issues about cracking of ceilings and things dropping from the ceiling and mold and pest issues and all kinds of other issues that don't provide a safe, healthy environment for our students. And yet now the solution that our chairman is moving forward is that we should simply remove the procurement requirements. And I hope we clarify, you know, the question that was brought up earlier by Senator Frank with regards to which and how is this bill and what is this bill addressing? Is this bill allowing emergency procurement for existing issues that were in the schools prior to the typhoon, or now that we've had the typhoon and there are additional problems added that need to be addressed and repaired? Is that what we're addressing? Because we're supposedly in emergency session to address issues that were raised as a result of Typhoon Mawar. Contrary to the comments that were made by the main sponsor, I don't believe that this will be the ultimate solution. I don't even think that this is going to address the key issues. I think we're going to still come back to the table, and we're probably still going to get more excuses as to why things are not done or not addressed. Because again, as I mentioned earlier, the Department of Education operates and manages their own procurement. And I think we need to be asking those questions instead of, having this bill addressed as an emergency in an emergency session where we originally called for one particular issue with regards to the gas tax, to have these things thrown on without allowing us to ask those questions, because I think it's important to have that dialogue. If we think that this somehow is going to address the issue, I'm sorry. Let's not go back too far in our memory. The pandemic. My goodness, I couldn't even see the microprint of the amount of emergency procurements, all the way down to grass cutting. There's only a certain company in all of Guam that does grass cutting or bush cutting. I should have applied, because I can bush cut. I'll bring my shindawa. And somehow we think that doing this in the public school system, we are rewarding bad behavior. We are rewarding the inability to properly deliver and operate a system. And you got to ask why. If the private schools can do it, and many of them do it with far less resources, and colleagues, you know that, and far less money. And of course, Dodea has a lot more resources, still can deliver, but not the Guam public school system. Consistently in the last few years, Guam public school system has not been able to deliver. And does that take away from the hardworking, dedicated teachers that are there, or the support staff that's there in the schools? It doesn't, but all we get is more finger pointing. All the reasons why we cannot operate a safe, clean environment for our students. And instead of holding them accountable for that, we praise them, and then we say the solution is, let's just get rid of the requirements. Even though, again, they operate their own procurement. But we don't have the DOE officials here to ask those questions, because we totally bypassed. A majority of the members of this body decided today that we're going to make this an emergency, and we're going to bypass that whole process, so we can't ask questions and we can't get answers. Dollars to donuts, because I'm a member of this committee, I am sure we're going to be sitting in more oversight hearings and more roundtables and umpteenth explanations as to why this did not happen and that did not happen, and why in a couple of months at the end of summer, a number of schools are not going to be ready to start school, and a number of these schools will not pass inspection. What are the odds of that, colleagues? You think it's going to be any better because we pass this and we open the floodgates to procurement? And then we don't even have the public auditor here to ask, hey, Mr. Public Auditor, Auditor BJ, is your office geared up to add on this additional responsibility of reviewing these emergency procurements to ensure that public money is being properly spent? But we didn't even get the chance, because I didn't even know this bill was going to be in the agenda, because the Speaker didn't send this to us yesterday. Like a number of other bills that were here, we weren't even informed. We were just walked in and, oh, here. Oh, you didn't see it sent. It's right there on your desk. There's the bill. Because we think we can somehow from this position not do the heavy lifting, and we can just introduce a bill and put our name on the top, and somehow we're going to make the problems go away. The monumental problems of the operations of our Department of Education, our public school system, and the inefficiency, superintendent after superintendent, of not being able to deliver and answer and address the basic needs and concerns of operating our school system. But we get excellent, evaluations, and we pat each other on the back, and where are we? And where are our students, and how is it any better? So no, I just look into the little crystal ball to the future, like I looked into the crystal ball last year and the year before about our financial situation while we were busy appropriating to the moon, or to borrow, Buzz Lightyear to infinity and beyond. Because we can't trip over ourselves fast enough to appropriate the people's money, whether it's there or not. knowing that this was coming. And then on top of that, we have a typhoon, and my goodness, God help us if we get another one this year, this fiscal year, because I don't know how we're going to fund it. Maybe we'll go back to playing the shell game and just try and move money around. And what's the old phrase? We got to borrow from Peter to pay Paul, and vice versa. Because all of a sudden, you know, we can appropriate all we want on paper, but if the cash, what's the other phrase? Ooh, cash is king. If the cash is not there, then what? You know, we play the politics so much, but the hard work that needs to be done and ensuring, because we don't, when you get right down to it, we don't ensure public accountability of public officials that are serving in their respective capacities, that don't deliver. Yes, I know, Speaker, I'm tired too, trust me. I've been at this a while. I'm very tired. And I just don't see this ultimate solution. If this is what our colleagues determine, oh, this is what we're going to do to make this problem go away for today, we're going to be fine. You know what? I mean, look as recently, my goodness, we can't even account, you know, wondering what's going on at DOE because we have overtime, accusations being made that officials at the Department of Education were charging overtime that they didn't earn, or excessive overtime they weren't entitled to. And I don't know if that's true or not. I've heard the allegation. I don't know, is anybody going to be held responsible for that? Isn't that an old, you know, when does that stop? How many public officials are going to go down that road? Charging overtime. This has happened in how many different departments and agencies of government of Guam? And then on top of it, to happen in our school system. We literally are stealing from our children. And these are supposedly public officials, assuming that these allegations are true, that are supposed to be there to help our children, our kids, help them get educated for the future so that they can be ready to get out there and make a better Guam and make a better world. And it's these very same officials you want us to just open the floodgates and, hey, everything's an emergency procurement. Let's just get on the bandwagon. I don't know how seeing the track record somehow is going to improve because we simply remove the standards. That they themselves have the ability, you know, it's like having the accelerator in the car. How far do you want to make the car go? I mean, all of us, I'm sure, at some point go over 35 miles an hour, but we got the ability to control that. And yet, we're going to go back and say, oh, don't worry about meeting your responsibility and obligations and performing your job effectively. We'll just get rid of the requirements because it's an emergency. And somehow we think that's going to, because I will be there, Mr. Chair, I will be there at your hearings, and we're going to find out what doesn't get resolved in the 120 days, you know, before Cinderella's pumpkin disappears. And there's no prince to come along and rescue her. I just think we need to be mindful, folks, when we make these type of decisions. We need to take the time to do it and do it properly. And also ensure that these public officials, who right now don't exist up here, so the people of Guam know who they are held responsible for what they get paid to do. And many of them get paid quite handsomely. Everyone's worried about my salary. Heck, I work, and I deliver. I can take an operation and deliver on it. So I can talk. But when we see this type of, you know, and I can empathize. He's just started. 6 months. Imagine scratching your head after a few years, and even though all that we give and we think that the solution is throwing more money at a situation and it doesn't come out any better. Let's see Senator Chris in 16 years, if he's still plugging away at this. We just don't hold people responsible. And yet we think that somehow our legislation, our words on paper is going to resolve this. This is going to create more problems. Because if you really believe that they're going to follow every letter to the law in signing these certificates, how much government procurement happens every day that's improper? And the signature is there. Oh, Elena, it's all there. Got it. Yeah. And then what do we do about it? Do we prosecute them? Do we require them to pay the money back? Ay, sus. Our dear people, are they being well served? I gotta wonder. I just have reservations with regards to opening up. I understand the intent of why the chairman wants to do this, because he wants to help them. I think we all want to help DOE. But we can't have them, we can't do their job for them. And if they're not doing their job, they should be accountable for not performing. Isn't that the system? Isn't that how it's supposed to work? Because throwing more money that's running out, folks, and it's running out. I mean, like I said, BBMR didn't tell us there's no 50 million. But we want to think there is. We want to tell the people of Guam there's 50 million out there. There isn't. With that, I have no further comments on this bill, Madam Speaker. Thank you.
Very welcome, Senator Brown. Anyone else on the main motion? Anyone else? If not, Senator Barnett, Speaker Therese, you are recognized on the main motion. Please proceed.
Thank you. And I'd like to begin by just restating how we got into this emergency session. Yes, there was a bill introduced over the weekend that was brought to my attention, and a request was made pursuant to the rules for an emergency session on the bill and to waive the public hearing on that bill. And every other bill that I've seen here, except for the crop compensation that was introduced earlier, maybe last week, every other bill was just introduced today. So I don't know what talking about. The speaker did something. I didn't do anything. It was the body that voted to put these bills on an agenda, and I don't appreciate that. We're going to follow the process. That's how it works. I can appreciate some people don't believe some of these things are emergencies. That's fine. They don't agree with my call. That's fine. In fact, that's fine. There's a lot of let's hold people accountable. What are we going to do? Yell at them? Is that how we're going to hold them accountable? We tell them to fix the schools and then bring them in and berate them because they haven't done it? Is that how we're holding them accountable? Because the way I see it, all we're doing is not getting the schools fixed. So I agree. I don't want DOE to shortcut this process because I think the process is okay. The procurement process has lots of protections built into it. And over the years, the emergency procurement process has protections built into it. And we don't agree with all the emergency procurements. We've seen the list. But if we want the schools to be fixed before August, we've got to do something. So this is another tool to give them. That's what it is. It gives them 4 months of emergency procurement. They are already using emergency procurement because the governor declared an emergency. And when they came to the hearing, speaking of keeping them accountable, they came to the hearing and they said straight out, we are able to do this with a combination of regular and emergency procurement that we are currently using. And they said that. And that's, I think, well, that's why I like the idea, because they said they have been able to accomplish certain things due to emergency procurement that they are under right now. And the goal of all of this was August 9 to open the schools. So August 9. It's the middle of June. It's the middle of June. They don't even have 2 months. They've got a month and a half to open the schools, let alone plan education. They want all the schools, or we want all the schools to be inspected before August 9, because all of those inspections expire in June, at the end of this month. They expire. So we've mandated that they will all be re-inspected. That's because of what we found at DOE in these facilities that are old. And yes, there's some incompetence, there's some lack of leadership sometimes, yes. But sometimes, I don't know. We just have to keep trying. Otherwise, what are we going to do? Sit back, punish them by not doing anything, and then the schools don't get open? That's the only question I have. Who gets punished when we punish somebody at DOE management? The students. And I am not the prosecutor. I think the OPA has done a great job. I think the DOE accountants themselves are the ones who reported these things to the auditor. They did it. And I expect them to continue to do that because they know they are complying with federal requirements and they are complying with local requirements, and they will go to jail if they don't. That's enough for me. And I think we're doing a lot to get involved, to focus, and I think that's really the key. It's really not a who can we punish over there, but can we help them focus? Can we help them dedicate every ounce of energy and time that they have to this, not everything else, to this, to getting the cockroaches out of the schools, the bathrooms working, the whole list. We want the inspections, we want them to pass by June, and that inspection says that the school is sanitary and safe for the students. Simple as that, but huge, right? They've told us in the oversight hearings that we've had, the roundtables that we've had, they have told us, and the previous speaker is absolutely right, they have now told us that contrary to what they used to tell us, that money was a problem, we never give them enough money, now they finally admit money is not an issue at all. Finally, they admit that. It's not an issue. Now they point to procurement as their problem. And I agree with the previous speaker. I don't think they should scapegoat anything. I think we've got a good procurement system. We need competent people to do procurement in the government of Guam. We have asked the governor by the bill, the law, Public Law 34-7, to put competent people in abundance to get the federal ARP money, the $120 million that DOE spent on fixing the facilities in time to meet the federal requirements. I don't think DOE can do it by themselves. I don't think they can. I think we've all agreed, I thought, that they can't. They need the governor, the lieutenant governor, every agency on Guam almost, especially DPW and other agencies. They need them. They need their help. They need the Department of Public Health and Social Services, all of us. They need help of DOA in getting the right people in there. We did give them their own procurement authority in an attempt to solve the problem. Not solved yet, but they've got that tool, their own procurement authority. They control the time frames of procurement. So when they come to our hearings and they tell us that procurement is taking too long, the procurement process is terrible, it takes too long, I completely disagree. The procurement process is very clear. You need to plan ahead, you need to do your hard work, you need to stay focused, and you cannot let it go. And you need to be realistic, that if it's going to take 3 months to write, 1 month to write specifications, 1 month to invite offers, and 1 month to do the awards, that's 3 months. We don't have 3 months. That's another conclusion we came to at the last hearing. We don't have the 3 months that they need to do these huge, gigantic CIPs, building repairs.
Speaker, I'm so sorry. We have to do a reset. I'll give you the time, but we're going to take a moment's recess just to reset per audio. Thank you. We are in recess.